Well, I think the planning board has enough to go forward, although I would hesitate to do it with such a sparse group here.
I did speak to EIR, so I know he'll be joining. I think it would be nice to have at least one person from the AHRB.
You're right. Right.
I'll text him now and see if he's going to make it.
Yeah, we've got the minutes and then the,
Yeah, well, let's do the minutes because nobody wants to do that anyway. So, well, let me officially open the planning board meeting of the Village of Dobbs Ferry for February 4. We have an agenda tonight, a very interesting agenda tonight with 10 items on it. Looking forward to that, and a lot of people joining us on various applications. So I would move that we open the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Good. Done. The first item on our agenda is to adopt the minutes of the planning board meeting of January 7, 2020. With the new system we get, I won't say we get more information than we need, but we get a lot of information now that goes up online. Is there any comments or corrections that we need on the minutes?
Yeah, on between pages 32 and 33. 32 is about that Ashford Avenue project.
Right.
And the resolution is for 156 Palisade. So there's something messed up about that. Somehow 156 Palisade didn't get an item number, or and there's no follow-up for.
No, good catch.
And I sent that to Liz earlier on today. So.
Well, I would move that we adopt the minutes as amended. Is there a second?
When it gets amended.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first official item on our agenda is the Ashford Avenue project as a joint meeting with the Board of Trustees. I'm a little hesitant to go forward with the, what do I see, 2 trustees here? Unless there are a lot of them are hiding. Donna, if you have any sense, or Michael?
Yeah, I had heard that Nicole was supposed to be here. I think Mara said she was going to be here. So let me shoot some things
I think
out.
they might have gotten confused about the time.
Well, we got a bunch of emails from Jen and Elisa on this. So
I mean, 7 is a new time, but
yeah.
still.
7 is the new 8.
Yeah, I am expecting them, but I think that there's a couple things. One, I think first off, Donna and I are likely to have the most to say about this. And second, I'm happy to summarize for the rest of the board the parts that they missed, because I think it's a long day for everyone, and I think we should just get started, and I can fill in the rest of the group afterwards.
Right, and the next thing, hi Deepta. The next thing is that, is there somebody here from the architect's office?
Christina Griffin.
Yeah, from Christina or one of her associates. That would be helpful too.
I
Hey.
just promoted them both.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm here with Suzanne Levine,
Good.
who is a project architect, and I'm also Andrew Cortese, the owner, should be watching. He's on
I just promoted him to panelist. He raised his hand.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, welcome. And this is officially the item number 2 on our agenda, 185-191 Ashford Avenue. It's a joint meeting with the Board of Trustees and the HRB for site plan review for the proposed new multi-use building. We look forward to this meeting to get more education and opportunity to talk about it by the various boards.
Great, thank you. We put the drawings up. Can everyone see them?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know about everybody, but I can.
We have, we've been to a meeting with the Board of Trustees and the Planning Board, and now we're back to be with you for a joint meeting. And we took another look at the kind of building we felt would fit on the site. And this image you see on the front page is our proposal to do an all residential building. And a lot of these ideas are based on getting a better understanding of that neighborhood, which seems to be primarily 2.5-story houses. Some of them are 2-family or 3-family. So we've come up with a design that we feel can harmonize with the scale and the character of that neighborhood. Just to remind the board, it's a downtown transitional zone, and I'm going to go to the next slide, Suzanne. And these are our photographs, just to remind you. The building on the left is that 2-story brick building is the one building that we'd like to save but rebuild and add a 3rd floor to. And to the right of it, which is the middle photograph, there's a 1-story building where the nail salon is, and we're planning to remove that building. This is currently, we have 3 retail spaces and 2 residential above. Next slide. That building is probably the only building, I just want to point out, in the neighborhood that has a flat roof and a large cornice. It looks more like a downtown building. Now, just to, again, refresh your memory, you see the highlighted area where the site is, 185, 191. Currently, there's an open space around the back of these 2 buildings, which is a parking lot. And then the photographs on the bottom, if you just take a quick look, as we talked about last time, a lot of the buildings in this neighborhood are 2 and 2.5-story buildings. Most of the 3rd floors are up in a roof line with dormers. And most of the roofs are gables. There are some hip roofs and a few flat roofs. And then many of the houses have porches. Next slide. There is a commercial building, the photograph on the left nearby. And if you look at the other houses, they are 2, and I'm not sure how many families are in each one, but 2 and 3 family houses, I think. Next slide. Now, after we took another look at the kind of buildings that exist in this neighborhood, we looked at other communities in Westchester. We found this one, and this is Tuckahoe, and we just wanted to show it to you because it looked like they had a similar challenge where they were putting housing near the downtown. And we thought it was really interesting how they picked up on the scale of the surrounding houses. And they have a multifamily building, but it has mostly, it's 3 stories, but most of the 3rd floor is up in a roof line. So we were really inspired by that. Next slide, please. So anyway, this slide is really to show you that our original submission was based on the idea that we would take the old building and we would add a 3rd floor and then maybe mirror it or do something that made this one building and tied in with the original architecture of that building. And then our current submission down below is a residential looking building. It's all residential. And And we've decided to switch to this scheme really because for a number of reasons. We want a building that really feels comfortable in that neighborhood. So we know that if we have the third floor tucked into a roof line with dormers and gables, that will give you a more of a two-story facade facing the street and have a better massing and scale for this this area that fits better with what's there. And also there is a concern that if we had storefronts that we may not be able to fill them up. You know, there's a lot of the businesses are struggling. Of course, there's a pandemic now, but still, we know that a lot of downtowns, if you look at how they've shrunken over the years, you know, a lot of downtowns, their commercial space is more concentrated towards the center of the downtown. And a lot of these areas outside that used to be have more commercial space are now turning into more residential use. So our scheme down below, we're going to show you a more detailed view of that. And I guess before we get to that, I want to show you this slide. This is our streetscape. And you can see that when we put this proposal into our streetscape, you'll see a lot of the shapes of the roofs and the length of the front facades are very similar to the buildings that are around. Lots of the 2.5-story houses have a width, a facade width of 20 to 30 feet. So we decided that we would break the building up into these different facades so that it would have a better scale and pick up on the size of facades that are already in that neighborhood. And then if you can see from the streetscape, there's quite a few of these gable roofs. So we felt that rather than a mansard, that a gable roof would be probably the best roof form that harmonizes with the existing buildings. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our current site plan. And I'd like to explain that this building on the left is the building we want to rebuild because of the structure is in good shape. We're planning to put a third floor on top. The building to the right, which is in yellow, is the one-story building we're planning to remove. And the purple is the new footprint that we're adding. So the existing footprint is really the building on the left, the one we're removing on the right, and we're adding the footprint that is in purple that comes around it. The light purple that says deck above parking, that is just outdoor space for the units above. Also, what's really a real benefit of putting residential units on the site is the parking already exists that allows us to do 11 units. We have 19 total parking spaces. We're proposing 11 units that require 17, but we'd like to keep the parking that's there so that we would have 2 extra more than that we really need. Next slide, Suzanne. Our plan now is that we will have it very similar to before, except the residential is on the first floor as well as the upper floors. So on the first floor, we have our central lobby with elevator, egress stair, and then we'll have 3 units on the first floor. They're 12 to 1,300 square feet with an amenity space, maybe a gym. And then on the second and third floor, we'll have 4 units on each. I think we are showing you just the first floor tonight, only because we're going to ask you for your comments and see if you are happy with the approach we're taking, and then we'll develop the building in more detail. Next slide, Suzanne, please. Okay, this is our facade, and this is a facade that we would like to have sort of variations on a theme. So we may have, we notice in the neighborhood, there's some brick, there's some stucco. So these are the materials that we may use in this building. We would like to have common proportions for all the windows. So that maybe there, you'll see similar size windows that pulls all the buildings together. We have some elements like roof overhangs and a bay window just to give it some depth. And then the entire third floor is tucked up into a roof line that's a variety of gables and shed dormers. Next slide, Suzanne. Now, this is the west elevation. So this is the view, this corner of the building to the right is what you will see. Everything to the left actually is, you'd see if you were looking down the driveway of the property next door. But what we'd like to do is still continue our roof line and wrap it around the back and all around the back and sides of the building. The east elevation is treated in the same way so that the corner unit looks like very similar to a 2.5-story house with a gable roof. At the very top of this building, we're planning to have common roof decks. On the west elevation, we have the opportunity to have some open roof decks for the units there. And also on the next slide, you'll see the rear elevation. Oops. I think
we don't have that developed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The real elevation has the parking tucked under the building. Actually, on the east elevation below, you see the cars underneath the building, tucked underneath there. Now the next slide is just my quick sketch to show the ideas that we have about just a quick 3-dimensional view of the kind of building I think would really fit here. That's residential in nature, has that bay of facade that's broken up into, it's actually from, I think, 24 to 28 feet. We have a center entrance, which will have a nice little porch. We've pushed the buildings back a little, so we have some green space in front of the buildings on the right, especially since the old building on the left is right on the property line. The roof line is something that is breaking up the building so that we have a 2-story facade and then a roof line that comes all around from around the front and all around the perimeter of the building. The roof decks in the top floor will be sunken in around inside the this roof line. And I think I'd like to just go back to our site plan, Suzanne, just because I just want the board to know, or the boards, that we are, you see all these little pocket of green spaces. So we are going to fill in wherever we can with some green space and put a fence along the parking area. Right now there's 2 parking lots back to back, and there's only, to get some privacy and screening there, we're going to put a fence up. And then of course we'll develop the sidewalk. So we have some plant beds and new trees there.
Christina, this site plan is amended from the paper copy you submitted on January 28th.
They changed, Suzanne, maybe you'll explain.
Yeah, I'll speak to it
You
because
have,
we
you
got
have
a,
different setbacks for the parking, which was what I was going to comment on.
yeah, we had a note from Han Engineering to look at the parking. And I just, we modified it. We're showing there's a required parking setback of 10 feet
Yeah,
on
not
the property line.
Not to the firehouse parking lot, but just to the residential zones.
Oh, I thought it was 10 feet from the property line.
No, 10 feet from residential zone.
Oh, okay. So
So
this,
that's the rear and left side.
oh, great. You know, we are clear the setback at the rear and at the left side. It was only this existing parking that I thought was an issue.
No.
But if that's not the case,
But in your earlier submission, you were only 5 feet
yeah,
to facing
right.
the 11, and
So I'm gonna,
you
yeah, I'll
didn't
tell you,
list the setback from the rear.
here, let me go back to so when we got the comment, we modified it, we pushed the parking over. So now we have 10 feet.
Yeah, it's good.
10 feet, when we actually I eliminated a space here just because we thought we would need this, better access for the waste storage over here. And so we preserved the 10 spaces here that were already there. So we're good then, I guess, with the back and the side, with the parking setbacks.
Yes.
Great.
Can we see the actual view of what is currently there? I have a question about the adjacent buildings. When we speak of this development, I keep hearing that we're talking about 2 different lots, and I still have a hard time identifying which are the 2.
It's one lot. It's just there was an addition added onto the building that doesn't look anything like the original building, and it's it's an eyesore.
So this white house that I see on the left-hand side where that black car is parked, is that staying?
No.
Hello?
Are you talking about the second row left side?
This one?
Yes. No, not that one. The one above it, right above that one, that one, yes.
That's someone
That's the
else's house.
That's not on this property. That's next door.
It's
So
the
then
white.
here is my point, and I know that Trustee Patino mentioned this before. I keep hearing the decks in this whole development, and I have a concern, just straightforward, with the decks and the privacy of the adjacent houses, the one on the left, the ones in the back. I'm a little bit concerned about that, Christina. So I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit about what the design of the decks and the height even of the building will be, and the privacy and the invasion of the neighbors nearby.
Well, yeah.
I'm gonna go to the side elevation. Christina, do you mind if I one thing I just wanted to mention here, because this, the existing buildings on a 0 lot line, we're not allowed to have, egress glass because of the fire code. So we set the wall back here to allow glass. And it made sense to fill that in with some porches, but the windows are needed for egress from the living spaces there. I just wanted to add that. That was one thing that drove that porch area there.
And that section that you're showing there, is that the left side of the building, or that's the back of the building?
That's the left. That's the side that's facing that house we were just looking at.
And what is all the way on top?
Those are roof decks at the top, at the top level.
I can tell you right now that I don't like the idea of neither of those things. I think that will be significant invasion of privacy to the people that have houses near this building.
Where does
Back to
the
the photos.
adjacent house,
Mhm.
how does the adjacent house set back from the street? Can you show it on the west elevation, or give us an idea?
You
on
can
the west
see here,
Yeah.
this is the area map. This is the existing house, and this is our site.
I just made a note of that concern. We need to set back the building 5 feet anyway to get glass and light into the spaces to meet code, because you can't put windows on a 0 lot line. And we were using the roof below for decks, but I understand what you're saying. So let us put some thought into that. I have to see the relationship of those decks with the house next door, find out exactly where it lines up.
Because Christina, if that the end of the building, would it be on this that will end on the street? I think it would be okay. But I think that the building is just facing somebody else's property.
Mhm.
That's my concern. So if you can please look
We're
into
going to try to address your concern. Okay. I will take a look at that idea. Like I said, we have to set back the building there anyway, and there's a lower roof there, but maybe we can find another place for outdoor space.
These are a couple of issues I'd like to just raise to the folks at the planning board, the AHRB, and rest of the board of trustees. I'll try to be brief about this part, but historically speaking, this downtown transitional zone included a number of sort of retail, restaurants. Going back, 20 something years ago, several of them were removed to make way for some larger 2 and 3 family buildings. And those buildings have always been sort of disproportionately scaled to the rest of the neighborhood. I just want to bring up that, this in thinking about what some kind of big picture village planning would mean, the eliminating the retail space is, it doesn't sit so well with me. I understand that there's some questions about the viability of certain things, in today's climate, but there are still plenty of things like, delis and grocery stores. There's certainly a need for people to have, sort of workspaces. So I think the board should think about that a little bit and a little more, in the sense of what this neighborhood is like and how it's going to change by eliminating these 3 retail spaces in exchange for more residential. So that's one element of this. The other element of this conversation should be about the building itself. And while I think that there was a cohesiveness and sort of logic to the last building that we looked at, I thought it was out of scale. I thought it was too big. My issue with the current building is that, it's really, it's kind of like the other building. It's just dressed up like a house. And I think that's problematic. I see the appeal of the inspiration image where there's a series of almost sort of they're more like townhouses. But this is really a building, and you can tell, this is an apartment building. You can tell from the parapet and the bulkhead. And so you don't have that playful geometry of the varying roof types, sort of all jumbled together. And so it's going to read like a very massive structure, just like the other one did. And so I don't think just the facade treatment is enough to pull it into scale with the neighborhood. But those are just 2 issues. I agree with Trustee Tarazi, on putting balconies, just looking into, neighbors' bedrooms. That's not a good practice. But I don't want to belabor that. So those are the 2 issues I wanted our boards to think about, all the boards to think about. Should it be, make it look like a building and then it just is that, or break it up in a way that it really is scaled to the neighborhood and not like those sort of oversized 3-family structures that are further, I guess that's west, east rather, on Ashford Avenue.
Yeah, I'm with you, Trustee Pacino. I don't know what I missed from the first few minutes when we were in a different Zoom, but I wanted to understand how the planning board how this project got to be this without the retail from when it was presented to us with retail, and understand the thinking behind that. And I think that is a key part of what we need to be determining in this meeting here, is whether out the gate, is that what we should be pushing for or not.
We also received a letter from the traffic committee supporting retail there.
Yeah, exactly. Because and just like Mike said, there's a walkability to having this downtown, this midtown, for the people who live in that part of Dobbs Ferry to be able to walk to those stores and not depend on their car to get them to Stop and Shop or their car to get them to Central Park Ave. And that's a key element of why it existed in the first place. And that's a big decision for the boards to be making, to strip that out basically altogether, as it's been whittled down, which I didn't know that part, that those other 2-family, 3-family houses used to have commercial. So that's an important decision for us to be making. And I think that is first and foremost what needs to be decided.
Well, I think that may well be very idealistic, but I think historically, retail has gotten smaller and smaller over the 55 plus years that I've lived here. There used to be bowling alleys, there were restaurants, there were a lot of things. And right now, across the street or on the other side of the street, the building keeps changing in terms of use. They can't sustain it. This building has had a lot of things. It can't sustain full occupancy. It makes no sense to me to try to put more retail in an area that obviously is not able, willing, or needs to sustain any retail. I think that's really a wrong read.
Can I just interject a moment? Excuse me. If we have four trustees present, can we have a motion to open the meeting on behalf of the trustees? We had one on behalf of the planning board, but if we do that just for the record.
Thanks. A motion.
Second.
Open it.
And a vote?
You know, in favor.
I oppose, yeah.
We don't know what to do without our fearless leader.
You did good. You did good. Thank you.
I have I'm gonna, this is Rob Lane from the planning board. I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of it. But I'm gonna respectfully disagree with my chair. I support basically what Michael is saying. I think that the thing that to me is the least appealing about the new proposal is that it looks generic in some ways, or at least in the sense that it looks like it could be located really anywhere. Whereas I thought the earlier scheme, the first scheme, Christina, if you go back and you put up the two elevations, right, the before, right. Where it was really apparent that you were reusing the old building. I mean, I'd like to, the fact is all along Ashford Avenue, including the ones later on tonight in the planning board, the applicant who's doing some work on the little buildings that you see when you turn off of the Sawmill onto Ashford Avenue, there's a real kind of history scattered throughout the village of these little kind of downtown-y feeling buildings that make these kind of characteristic nodes in different places. And so I think the expression of the kind of multi-use building is just much more sort of in keeping, not just with this area, but with kind of what happens in other places along Ashford Avenue. I'd like to suggest in terms of what Steve's saying, because it is true that brick and mortar retail is suffering. It doesn't altogether have to be first of all, it doesn't have to be retail space, although retail space would be desirable. It could also be live work space. It could be office space of some kind. There are other, depends how broad you want to define it, but it could be some kind of public facing use. And it wouldn't necessarily have to occupy the entire length of the ground floor, I don't think, to achieve the effect. I actually think that the scheme, the first scheme, the one that's shown above here, and I actually thought in a way, this is one of the things, Christina, that we came to at the end of the last meeting was that you were experimenting with various ways of keeping that kind of multi-use building and that basic look, but playing around with the massing in a way that would make it feel more in scale. So that might have been a more significant setback between, at the third floor or something like that for part of the building, or perhaps at the corner.
Yes.
A more significant setback where you transition to the single family houses that are to the west of it. So I unfortunately, I kind of agree with Michael. I feel like understand the desire to respond to the scale issue, but I think we've lost something about the character of this place.
Okay. I'd like to respond to that because.
Can I make a couple of notes before you, Christina?
Okay.
Just to address both comments on Michael's and Rob Lane, because I'm aligned with their sensibilities in terms of the read of the building of the house, reading of the building versus the commercial ground floor. And I think all derives from understanding the character of Ashford in terms of the big difference between a building that sits on the lot line, on the sidewalk, and the buildings that are next to it, or the houses. It's the setbacks, it's the front yards, it's the ground floor, elevated ground, the porches, etc., that you mentioned. So these buildings, bringing the building to the street line, it kind of changes the scale of the reading. First and second, I think now from the developer point of view, based on my experience as developer, I think that a community facility of let's say dentist office, of accounting, or even treat this development as a maisonette type, where you have what Rob Lane says, live work, where the ground floor with a window could complement an apartment upstairs. It could be a desirable issue. I know that there is a demand for that. That's from the developer's point of view. But again, I think that placing the house on the street line is not a very convincing understanding of the street, of the Ashford. And if we treat those two buildings, let's say from Young Street to Ogden, as an area of a transitional zone, a downtown transitional zone, where you have the firehouse, this corner, the Scapis corner, it kind of creates a relief for certain types of amenities that I think that it will be a miss if we don't consider the need to it. I understand that what Steve Hunter said, that the use of the retail is decreasing, but this is more of a community use. So it's not a restaurant here, but maybe a dentist office or some accounting firm. I don't know. But those are my comments that I would like to see more of an understanding of the street and how it fits into Ashford. And I don't think that the first approach was kind of on the right direction. The second approach is maybe missing it. That's my first reactions to this. Go ahead.
I'd like to respond. Yeah, my first reaction to the site was that there is some history in that building. There is an interesting oversized cornice, and maybe we should preserve it. And because, when you save things, it gives you a sense of place and history. And the challenge is, what do you put next to it? Our proposal is only at 45% lot coverage. We can go up to 60. We don't want to overdevelop this area, but we want to expand and add housing here. And our first design was based on a building that would really tie in with the architecture that already exists. But then the scale of it seemed out of scale because of the size of the facade. So this second approach, and I want to say this is still a preliminary design. We haven't even developed all the plans for this. We just took another look to see if maybe the scale is very important. And we can't just simply have a bigger building that has a similar details to that commercial building that's there. But we're very open to the idea, because I've done it in other places, live work perhaps units, or ways to say that maybe there can be some I mean, some commercial use here, but not a restaurant, obviously, you know, something that, and maybe, you know, one of the things that's very challenging for, I think, any architect or designer that's, you know, if you're putting a bigger building next to, or expanding the current building that's there, what kind of design works with it? Because this is a very traditional downtown building that is there with storefronts below, lower cornice line, upper cornice. So, you know, we do have a design where we push the third floor black so we could actually preserve the original building. But then if we're adding these units, what kind of architecture fits with it? And that's what led us to maybe redesigning the whole building, putting a new building here. But, you know, we're presenting these options to get your feedback. So, you know, if it's important to the village to keep some history here, we can see if we can combine these ideas and maybe preserve that facade that exists, see if we can get some very kind of modest type commercial use in the storefronts or liverwork, something like that. So we're hearing you, and we know, I just wanted you to see another approach, because I think the scale of this neighborhood is very important too. You know, if we put 11 units on the site, we have to make sure that it feels comfortable with the mix of buildings that are there. So anyway, we're just presenting these ideas to get your feedback, and we can certainly take another look at this and see if we can keep some retail. I don't think we should have much of it, because I know it should not be too big. I just don't know if it really survive. And maybe save the building that's there. You'll have to let us know how you feel about that.
Christine, if you go a little further down on Ashford Avenue, more toward the Ogden Place and Ogden Avenue, there are a couple of storefronts there already that are right there. There's a nail salon. There's a little, you know, you've seen them. There's a refinishing store.
Right.
So there are things like that. I also agree that I think the building's a little out of scale. Now, since you are you're taking down that second building.
Yes.
Any idea of doing something a little different like that, like they've done at 156 Palisades, where maybe you move it back so it doesn't look like it's one big massive
Absolutely.
building?
We have that idea.
I'm not asking for that, just throwing that out.
No, I know, but we're thinking of that idea. Yes, absolutely. We could definitely look at that idea. Yeah.
That might take the mass away a little bit. You know.
In terms of studies, economic studies for what combination might be successful, is that, I mean, besides you know, the opinions of the boards, is there a way to look at this you know, in terms of the economics, to see what's going to survive the best?
Well, I know Andrew has some strong feelings about that. I don't know if he's still on, but
besides feelings, is there actually some data that you can look at that will help make the decision?
Oh, you mean for the commercial space?
Commercial versus residential, yeah.
I would like to find something to look at. I don't know. We don't have that, no.
Yeah, because otherwise we're just voicing our opinions, and it doesn't help the owner or the developer to have a successful building.
But you could look at, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I just want to make a point that the laundromat has been probably out for probably 4 years, and we've been trying to rent it, and the previous owner has been trying to rent that space as well. And he hasn't had no luck, and nor have I. So what I did hear from the nail salon, that, you know, the cars have been, you know, cars going through there travel really fast, and nobody kind of looks in that area, and it's hard to draw attention to their location. That's basically what she brought up to me.
Although, you know, you could argue in our traffic committee, and I want to talk a little bit in a moment. I want to yield my time back in just 1 second. You know, one of the issues is the car speed there, right? And that's another issue that we could think about. Like, maybe the cars should be traveling more slowly as they go through this area, so that they would see the businesses that are there. And there's an interest in general in the town in slowing down speeds. So
That's a good point.
One key thing, if everybody can remember Lower Main, like pre-75 Main, across the street from 75 Main, pre-66, when those were not renovated or new buildings, retail and commercial was not strong down there at all. And now that they are all new and designed to fit whatever people are needing now, they're all doing much better. And we have like another hub in the downtown of those new businesses. So I wouldn't say that using the history of these rental properties, these commercial spaces to inform the future use of this. I mean, like, they're old, they're not renovated, they're not attractive. They're not as attractive as a new building would be. And I think that the first design that we saw where it was new would be highly attractive to all sorts of different kind of retail and commercial entities. And it wouldn't be a matter of like, ooh, let's make it as small as possible so that somebody could do it. I think that if it was a new renovated building, it would be attractive to a bunch of new types of commercial clients that would not be looking at it right now. They would not take that laundromat spot, but they would likely take a new renovated building spot. So I just don't want anyone to focus too much on the struggle that they've had with the existing commercial spaces, because I don't think that is at all informing what could possibly happen if it was well designed and attractive, and especially if it had more units above it, because then there's people upstairs to shop there that weren't there before. So
I agree.
And back to the parking issue and the speed on Ashford, it could be, I'm just looking at the image to the left, maybe some spaces could be included along the street there, sort of designated as, parking spaces, that would certainly slow traffic down. It would indicate to people that there's something there. I think we all have, obviously, Mr. Cortese, we don't have the same degree of investment as you will here, but we're all invested in this being a successful endeavor. I live in the neighborhood. I would love to see this building renovated. I'm very happy to see you, working on this. I'm happy to see Christina's office, because we're always very happy with the projects that she designs. And so we want this to be successful. We want to do what we can, from the board's perspective. Perhaps we put our heads together and try to help with some brainstorming and research on the types of successful typologies of businesses that are working today and sort of will grow and function for your space. So we all want to help.
I appreciate that.
I just want to just raise a few issues. There was a very, I thought, thoughtful memo from the traffic committee, which I don't know, Christine, if it's been shared with you or not. I just give you a few highlights of things that I think were interesting. One was the idea of there being some kind of ped bike connection from this site to the so-called Fireman's Alley. There's a little alleyway between that goes back to Virginia from where the firehouse is. I think that's an interesting idea. The idea of there being really ample accommodations for bicycles here. And then the sort of the third one, which is maybe a little bit more ambitious, was this questioning of whether or not a portion of the parking lot could actually be built over as a way of giving yourself more flexibility. On the one hand, it makes the building longer, so you have to deal with the massing and the scale issues we're talking about, but it might give you some flexibility around some things that you hadn't, that are possible that weren't before, because there certainly are examples of building over the one story of parking lot there, so you wouldn't have to actually look into a parking lot. But
we actually explored two buildings separated, but there are advantages to having a core of elevator and egress stairs,
Sure.
So I mean, we had also thoughts that we could connect them, but make them feel distinct from each other, because there's so many advantages, because if you had two different buildings, each one would have elevator egress there, which would be not efficient space-wise. And but these are all ideas certainly look worth looking at. And I do, of course, appreciate the history of that building. So we're gonna take all these ideas into account, and maybe next time we'll show you more than one scheme.
Christina, the traffic committee had also mentioned, which we introduced to you when you were doing 41C, the idea of unbundled parking, if that might work in this area, because there are a lot of people. I mean, if there are spaces that go unused in this building by the residents, there are a lot of other residents in this area who do not have driveways, who do not have garages.
Yes, yes.
There would be an opportunity, if these spaces aren't being used, to rent them out.
Right, yeah. I made a note of that. Yeah, that's a good idea. But I appreciated the comment about, sometimes we think the commercial is not working well, but you see some places that have been revived, and it might be, and we have another housing market that's very strong related to condos and townhouses, and there are a lot of people that are looking for handicap accessible homes, which with very little maintenance, lots of convenience in the downtown. So, that is something that I hope this design will appeal to people who are looking for those kind of homes.
And there's a hospital right there too, that could help with the traffic for the retail, depending on what's there. I know the deli does very well when it's not COVID.
Christine, I'm sorry. I have a very hard time looking at these small pictures that you're showing me what is in display right now. How many other buildings in that adjacent area are actually 3 stories? Because it seems to be that the majority of them are 2 stories, even including the firehouse.
I think there are some that have
no, I recognize the ones that as you're moving further, but those are not right close to this particular building. I'm more concerned about the ones that they are right next to it, because further down, yes, I do recognize that there are some that they have a higher architecture, but I was just curious because it seems to be that there's just like 1 or 2 that they might be 3 stories. Because originally, I think that I asked how high the building was going to be or how many levels, and I thought that originally I was told that it was going to be only 2 stories.
No, we had 3 stories from the beginning, but we meet the maximum height of 35 feet. I think that there are most of the buildings are 2-story on the street, and some have attic spaces up in the roof line, up in the roof cavity,
I personally say I appreciate Maura's concerns, but I think the 3rd story is actually something that could be handled if there's, a real massing change. If there's a real attempt to break down the scale of it, I think a 3-story building is not out of the box unreasonable to assume here.
I will be open-minded to it. It just continues to kind of circle around the whole privacy element of the neighbors. That's kind of like where I'm going with that.
I think the issue, Rob, is not the 3 stories per se. It's the 3 stories plus the parapet plus the bulkhead, and so what, it is, in a certain way, it is a 35, 35 feet tall, but really there isn't any other precedent for that on the street. For the 35 feet is, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the ridge height, or
it's to the flat roof.
no, but the 35-foot height, maximum height is for like just so the zoning district ends just east of there, the DT, right, and then becomes another one.
Yes.
And
it's
so the
NAR1
maximum height of a
to the
house,
west.
like at 175 Ashford, for example, is what? It's 35 feet to the.
Yeah, depending on the pitch of the roof.
So Rob, I think I think that's what I'm reading at least, and I think I'm hearing that from other people, is that we're seeing it's the 35 feet to the flat roof, but then you have parapet, you have.
I understand. I
and
understand.
in actuality, it's 45 feet or whatever.
I understand. I wouldn't want to send Christina off unless we absolutely, there's consensus that a 3-story building is just out of the question. I wouldn't want to send her back to the drawing board with the condition that this building should not be more than 2 stories. I mean, I'm interested in seeing a larger, somewhat larger building here if the massing can, moderate its apparent scale.
I agree.
But looking at it from the side, can we go back into that one? To me, it's like it seems that it has the garage space, then it has the 2 other levels. Like it seems to me like once you add, as Michael stated, the deck and this additional piece that is on top, it really significantly make it look much higher than only a 3-story building.
But you'll never see it this way, right?
Just want to say that I agree with Rob Lane on the 3rd story.
I want to mention something in the downtown transitional zone. If the building is on Ashford Avenue or Cedar Street or Main Street, the maximum height is 35 in the DT zone is 35 feet to the top of the building, and then you're allowed a 42-inch parapet. But then when you go to like on 13 English is downtown transitionals, but it was not on Ashford Avenue, and it is 35. The requirement is 35 feet to the midpoint of the roof. So even though
You're almost right, Christina. So
I'm trying to figure it out.
You just got the parapet wrong by a half a foot. So
3 feet.
The rub is that you're allowed a 3-foot parapet that isn't included in your height, but by code you need 42 inches if you're going to use the roof as a deck. So you have to drop the building down 6 inches.
I see. Thanks. But the point is that in other areas, we're allowed 35 feet to the midpoint of the roof, so that we're still trying to make this as much as possible meet code and not necessarily go to the max, especially with lot coverage. But we'll take all these thoughts, your comments into account, because there's other ideas where maybe we could push the building back so the mass recedes, so we still have this feeling of a 2-story facade in the front along the street.
One thing that we haven't talked about is the buildings across the street from this. When I stopped and looked at this neighborhood personally, the buildings on the other side of the street are uphill, and they're also 2.5 stories. So they're really quite a bit higher than I think this structure would be already.
Yeah, there's this is a hilly street, and I think it's interesting how I think you can see the roof lines as you come down into Dobbs Ferry, and you will see more than just the facades along the street.
I have to say, driving up, when I'm looking at this view, the east view, right now, it looks like it's within the same height as the building to the right of it. But when you drive down there and I drive there every day, I think a 3-story in the same plane, in the same face, may seem to be a little bit too massive. But I'm not sure if, like you were saying, Christina, if you could set it back somehow, it may not feel that way when you're actually driving up that slope from this view.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think we're going to do some look at these 3D studies so we can see if there's a way to do a higher building, but keep the scale as you see along the street.
And that house next to it is kind of receded back too. So, I mean, how does that kind of work with this building, you know, that you're proposing?
Right.
The neighbors.
Yes. We'll have to see that relationship. We'll probably have to get into a 3D model to get a better understanding of that, which we plan to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks to trustees for joining us tonight. I think it's been very, very interesting, very helpful, I hope, for the applicant. And we'll look forward to being with you again next month if you are ready at that point.
Thanks so much for your time and your comments.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christina.
Nice to see you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
If you're done with the trustees, then somebody has to take a motion to close the trustees meeting.
But actually, why don't we actually excuse the applicant and we have a joint discussion, considering that everyone is here?
No, we have 7 more properties to look at.
Yeah, this is planning
This
board
is the
meeting.
planning board agenda. We've been invited for the first item, and as long as you've opened.
My apologies.
Can I just?
No, it's a great idea. We have a long night ahead of us.
No, I'm not envying you. You guys have fun.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Mr.
Can you take
Chairman,
is
If
there-
they're closed,
I'm trying to move the applicants to the attendee. Sorry,
I'd just like to ask the chairman if it's a joint opinion that we're continuing the joint meeting next month.
I think I don't know. I think we could have a meeting ourselves and move this along. But I think we understand what the trustees' concerns are, and why don't we do?
I would support another joint meeting. I thought it was really, really helpful, and it's gonna streamline things a lot, I think, ultimately. And I think, she's gonna come back with some pretty different things, I think. So I personally would advocate for another joint session.
So we have a concept agreed on, right?
Right, until we have, right, once we have even a rough idea about whether it's 3 stories or at least at that level, it seems like she was open to some pretty fundamental changes. So I feel like it's worth one more, in my opinion. One more.
I agree.
Okay.
If the applicant meets your deadline, then, we'll need to post and publish another special meeting of the board, because just keep, I'm sure the building department will keep us posted as to whether this particular application meets the next deadline. And if it does, then we'll get Liz involved and we'll publish another joint meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Orly, do we need a motion to close the trustees?
Yes.
Make a
you need
motion to close.
motion.
Motion to close.
Hold on.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Donna seconds.
So they have to do it, Rob. We can't.
I know, I was waving goodbye.
Okay, at 8:04, the minutes will
Take the
reflect
vote.
that. Did the board vote? Did we?
No, vote, guys.
They don't want to leave, but they're.
Well,
I'm not going anywhere, so I'm here.
the next application is the Palisade application, and the board does not have jurisdiction, so they can stay as observers if they would like, but
Right. But
thank
they-
you.
but
Let
they-
the minutes reflect, 8:05, the board's meeting is ended.
Say, but they can't speak. All right. Good night.
So just last thing about this application, I'm really sort of surprised that the applicant doesn't have more resources to find out whether retail or housing is going to work in this spot. It just sort of amazes me that, there's not a way to, he's going to spend millions of dollars building his building and he's just going to guess, or he's going to use his gut to sort of see what's going to work there. That sort of is amazing.
Well, doesn't the building or the Chamber of Commerce or the village have metrics on occupancy in retail spaces downtown or in the whole village?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
There is a highest and best use that you can order from a real estate company that will tell you what will be a successful model, real estate model for the place. It's very simple.
But it doesn't account for what Christy was saying, which is that an entrepreneur who has an interesting idea can make something, when you're at this scale, we're talking about micro scale here. I don't know. I think that those things that Ayer is talking about are good guides and so on, but I think it doesn't account for what a creative entrepreneur might pull off.
It's true, but it gives you some indicators that
yes, it does.
That's valuable more than guessing. And then you can, of course, there is an entrepreneurial risk that you will take, and it's.
Mr. Steinschneider has an opinion about this.
Well, I have an official role. I am the member of the chamber who is the committee member for Dobbs Ferry. And the chamber is still relatively young. We haven't gotten to doing those kinds of things, but I think there is an enthusiasm for being more involved. And what I'll do is I'll bring it back to the chamber at the next meeting and see if they've got an interest in looking at stuff. I know, I guess Rob Barron isn't on this, but the traffic committee has kind of done a very interesting evaluation that almost rivals what the planning board does, but that's not my job. So
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, okay, thanks. All right. Item number 3 on our agenda, 156 Palisade Street, is public hearing for site plan review for proposed new multifamily building, a joint meeting with the Architectural and Historic Review Board.
Can I share the screen?
The public hearing, I would move we open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Cool. That's really good news. Yeah, some of this is moving very slow tonight on this presentation. I'm not sure, so some of the slides might take a minute to change. At the last meeting, we showed some ideas that David Kim, who's on, had kind of helped us get to, which I think got a fairly good response, just as evidenced by the fact that we've gone to a public hearing. We did meet with the Architectural Review Board on this, I guess it was a week ago, and they had some interesting suggestions, which we've started looking at. They are not, they're very similar to the drawings that you received, but I can point out the differences. I did show the changes that we made in response to the Architectural Review Board because I think they were improvements. So I'll kind of walk you through those, and then David can kind of explain some of the what he's trying to do. Just see if this moves. Don't need that. This was the first sketch that David had done that kind of brought a different approach to it. We kind of evolved that. David moved some things, and this was a better refinement. This is what we prepared for tonight's meeting for the planning board. This is what is the result of the conversation that we had with the Architectural Review Board, and we can get more in detail with that in a minute. I'm just going to kind of lay this out, and then I'll ask David to kind of walk you through some of the things. Don't need to look at that. And then this is where it moves slow. And then we get to the next one. Okay, so here's the sheet that we submitted with the change that we made. Basically, the change was to the middle portion, which changed to be more of a zipper between the two volumes, which I think was a good idea. It clarified the massing. So David, if I can, I'll bring up the image of this, if you want to walk people through it. Okay. Just tell me when you want me to move.
All right. What we did was we, based on the our presentation to the AHRB, we the comment was to simplify the entry and the stair, because as we the submission as we presented that involves like 3 different roofs, and I think we're just trying to get a little too tricky with that. So their suggestion was simplify it so that it doesn't look so foreign in the whole thing. And so we actually just made that one single volume with a single roof, so that there's just the roof of the stair tower and lobby, and then the roof of the porch, the entry porch, as you see when we look at the front elevation. I'll
bring that up. The other thing is, I don't know if it was Zaire or just all the architectural review board members felt that the ramp being right against the porch in the front was kind of awkward, and suggested we move the ramp up to the edge with the sidewalk and kind of simplify the staircase too. So that kind of made that a lot cleaner and easier.
Right.
Do you want me to take you to the floor plans?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'll skip over this stuff. This is stuff I don't want to even talk about. Okay.
I have one question though about why is the ramp, because we did talk about there being some kind of, as there are for other buildings along the street, a kind of a landscape zone between the kind of porch and the sidewalk. Where would that landscape, now I feel like it's gonna be kind of a harder edge walking by that ramp. How was it before? I thought there was kind of a space, a landscape space.
You're right, Rob. We actually had the ramp right up against the deck, the patio of that front unit, and then we had a planter space beyond that to the edge of the sidewalk.
Right.
I think what we can do is, I don't know how much space there is between the edge of the ramp and the patio.
Yeah, it's about, we have like 3 feet between the deck and the wall, and then 5 feet for the ramp.
I think what we can do is create an 18 inches or 24-inch planting area, so that you can end up growing something that is fairly tight up against the wall, and have a little planter area out front. I mean, that can be adjusted, so we can do that. I think the part of the issue that we were trying to that having a ramp, having a thoroughfare that's right in front of somebody's private patio is an issue, and so I think that creating both planting areas on either side of the ramp would be a good thing to do, and I think we can create that. We can soften that edge a little bit with some planting that will go up the wall. Yes.
Kim, David, can I just add a small minor comment that a natural stone, well-designed retaining wall or parapet wall is as good as any landscape, and can be treated as landscape, and it's not a hard edge per se if it's well designed.
That's a good point. Sure. I think IR has a good point about that. Well, let's not get hung up on it.
Yeah. Let's move.
I feel like you should, Patty, I interrupted you wherever you were.
No, I think what we've got is something sliding back and forth, and it doesn't change the design in terms of the use or the function or any of those things. So it's really going to be a kind of the nuance of it. And maybe it's a compromise, as David said, where we separate between the deck and the retaining wall and pull the ramp in. Maybe that's 2 feet of planting along the edge to soften the stone. But the other thing is that, the height of this is not, it's not like down on lower Palisades where it's a story. This is, I think we're at 113 and 109. So it's about 4 feet high at the high point.
Yep.
So you're walking by and it's not in your face.
Is the ramp required by ADA? I mean, you can't just go in through the garage?
I mean, that's a kind of philosophical thing, really. What we've been trying to do from the start is, understand the population and what's happening in the next 20, 30 years. And the idea that we're going to have a lot of people who are elderly, myself probably included, hopefully. And the idea that a building like this would not necessitate somebody with difficulties negotiating stairs to go and enter through the garage. I mean, the reality is if you come down to here, we've got a door that's at the bottom of the ramp to the garage where you could go into the elevator. So it wouldn't really be terrible, but I just think it'd be very nice if people in a walker or a wheelchair or having difficulty with stairs could just walk in and not have to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and you're correct. It's not the, we don't have to. But I think, as Patty mentioned, that it is a much more inviting gesture for people, and much more inviting situation for people of all ability to be able to access the front of the, to enter the building as everybody else does. So.
Also, my son was a very avid skateboard guy, and my 2-year-old grandson is following in that. And I can just imagine the idea of going up the ramp and then doing the stairs and grinding on the rail. So,
well, that's the problem for the owner, not us.
I think the basic form of this, the basic massing, is similar enough to other places on Palisade Street. You see alleys with a building setback in the back, and I think you've gotten the facade the right sort of scale. To me, the elephant on the coffee table is the building footprint in the basement. If we're ready to allow, or forgive the intrusion into the setbacks in the basement, because that sort of sets a precedent for a building style that I think is more profound than just sort of rearranging the facade.
We're at 34.8% with the first floor.
I'm talking about the basement. I'm talking about the garage.
This portion back here where it's fully underground.
Well, it's over 40, isn't it over 40%? It's like 45%.
Yeah, that was the chart that I tried to go past really quickly.
So that's really, I mean, I appreciate that you've done so much work on the above ground building that I think it's really getting, it's getting to a place where we can look at it. But I think we got to solve this problem with the footprint in the garage, because that's actually a big difference from all the work that Rob and Ed were doing on trying to establish a building coverage percentage in this area.
I totally understood. I mean, that's something for you guys to figure out. What we've got is a 6-car garage, which is one. Well, that's another thing we should talk about.
Yeah, but see what I'm talking about is if we say, oh, you can't have that space, then you get into the parking argument, and then that might affect the rest of the building. So
it could, but the other option that we'd have would be to eliminate the cover. In other words, if this was just a recessed parking area open to above, then it would be a parking lot. It wouldn't be a building. But in terms of what's going to be aesthetically pleasing, usable, nice for the community, having something that you don't see the cars just does seem like a better idea. Would there be anything gained for the public to use the tool of calling this a parking lot instead of a part of the building to get past that? It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
But you understand our dilemma that if the planning board grants you, a variance for 45%, then what do we do with that? And it's, the next guy comes along and says, I want 45%,
Well, and if they can put the parking underground so you don't see it, I would think that I think we've got good attorneys that help write the resolutions where the specificity of the intent of this would be such that what you'd be talking about is 34 point something, not 45 point something with the building mass itself.
That's a possibility. Ed, is that like another step? How do we do that? I don't think I'm not totally against that idea to hide, a larger mass, but I don't know. I want to hear Ed's opinion on this.
Well, I'd have a more defined opinion if his zoning chart didn't have a lot of to be determined on it.
Yeah, well, it is. You can see the basement.
But in my opinion, if you were to waive the impervious by building, the coverage by buildings to allow for, a screened parking, which is a benefit, then the impervious total should come more in line, so that you're not just granting waivers on both and setting a precedent.
So yeah, so he has on his proposed garage 42%. And I think that you were talking about with your sliding scale 34% for. So that's a decision whether we think that underground parking can be a larger lot coverage than an above ground than a above ground building.
That's something for you guys to figure out. The current zoning is 27%. You guys have developed guidelines at the moment, for waivers that you would be perhaps willing to consider. There's no guarantees on it. It's not like anybody can rely upon the code. At the same time, the contextual zoning area here is one that averages higher than 42%. So we're surrounded by buildings that are significantly higher percentage of site area. And if I understand, I still haven't really, Ed did send me the numbers, but I haven't seen like all the wording and the definitions and all that. What I think we're looking at is if you had a 5,000 square foot lot, you would be permitted 40% site coverage with the building.
Then there's the sliding scale.
Exactly. So in this case, the sliding scale for the building itself, what you see as a community surrounding the site, looking from the street, we're within striking distance of that number. It's what's below ground and you cannot see, which gives you the benefit of the parking, which is, we can certainly discuss the idea of there being a parking lot across the street and maybe we don't need all the parking. At the same time, everything I hear in every conversation in the village is that the boards are giving away everything to the developers by not requiring them to provide parking. I actually took the risk of wading into a discussion that was pretty stupid because they were basically claiming that all of the projects that have been approved by the village in the last couple of years were approved without any parking. And that's just absolutely not true. You guys have required parking for all of the projects. So there's a perception in the community, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know that we're in a position to determine that, but us providing 6 parking spaces on site concealed, I think is a benefit that we're providing to everyone. It would be something perceived by that the planning board did a good job.
I agree, Patty, that providing the parking is important, and I agree that it's a benefit to allow a larger percentage of building coverage. But yet to my earlier point, if you're allowing the larger building coverage to allow for parking and screen that parking, you still have the total impervious coverage.
Right.
So something's too big, right?
Well, we've provided some things that are probably nicer than they would have to be that would reduce your impervious coverage. We can eliminate the walkway to the back, the steps, those things that make it nice. And that gets our impervious coverage down.
You can still have walkways and reduce the perviousness of them, with open weave, with the gravel that's not a concrete walkway.
And we're perfectly amenable to any of those if that's a preference. I've been told that it snowed recently, and I can't imagine trying to clear gravel walkways in that storm, but mainly because I use a snowblower, and that would just be incredibly dangerous.
Well, it's like a machine gun, but you can still use open weave pavers, things like that.
Sure. And maybe that's where, what we haven't yet done, because it would just be spending a lot of money without any guarantee of the direction it's going, is we've got Hudson Engineering. They've already done the assessment of the site. They've done the perk tests and all that. And they do a very good job of 100% accommodation of stormwater. So the goal is to, once we have this set, is to turn to them. And if they're able to accommodate all of the stormwater runoff in a way that's acceptable to the village's consulting engineer, I don't know what difference 60% and 67% makes in terms of anything that would really matter to the public. It's as long as the water's being handled and the site is stable. I think you've done the right job.
Engineering is totally out of, another story. That's just engineering. You're just handling the stormwater. The coverage is there for zoning, not for.
You know what? There are other designers who just simply make the building smaller, and then there's enough room for parking and enough. It's 5 units instead of 6, and and then everybody's happy, and it passes. In a matter of 2 or 3 months instead of 2 or 3 years. So that option is always there. It's still just lines on paper.
I guess, although I have to say, as we start getting very, very close to the, as the person who invested so much time in coming up with the numbers, I have to still say, as we get very, very close to them, I start, this is a place where I think, downtown is a place where we want more housing units rather than fewer. So I kind of feel like if the building if we're getting to a point where the building really looks like it is surely one of the larger buildings on the block, but not out of scale, I would not be into the idea of losing a unit here for the sake of, if we're really, really getting close to the other.
This might be a kind of totally inopportune moment to bring it up. But when we've run the numbers, this is very tight, in terms of economics. We are required, because we're over 5 units, as I understand it, to provide a affordable housing unit. And if we take 1 out of 6 to make it an affordable housing unit, we actually have, it isn't as secure a project. So what we've done is we've divided the 2 units on the first floor into 3, so that we've got the affordable unit and then 2 smaller 1-bedrooms on the first floor.
So you are providing an affordable housing unit.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
I know. I just want to wade into the debate. So just going back to Steve's comments on the parking and the impervious, I recommend, regardless, an open weave. Reduce the impervious surfaces is always a good idea, first. And second, if I have to choose between exposing the parking to comply with the lot coverage and not enclosing it and bringing the maintaining the building in scale with what we are discussing, I think I'm inclined to agree with Robert, but the Robert Lane on the issue of this is it's a good compromise, and density is an issue, and if we have the affordable unit, so it's something that I will also view it as permissible.
See, I wouldn't be against the applicant paying for a couple of spots in the lot across the street. And that gets into the trustees, the Board of Trustees territory. I mean, it's a parking lot right across the street, and you've always made that point, Patty, and it's really a thing. And when trustees say, well, there's no free parking, that's fine too, but I'm sure there's a way to bridge that gap,
Yeah, I also I think that it's a shame to not use that parking lot. I understand maybe, it's 20 years from now, we'll wish we hadn't done that, but I just think that's too far away in the time wise. And I feel like it's too bad we can't use some of those spaces. I just don't know what the arrangement would be. I know we have a payment in lieu of, but I don't know, do we actually have a mechanism for the developer to essentially, have a long-term lease on 2 spots or 3 spots in that parking lot? Is there a mechanism for that?
Yeah.
There is
Parking
no
permit.
mechanism for that.
Parking permit.
Yep. It's called a parking permit, yeah.
And that's discretionary. Anybody, this building is located in the area that entitles them to make that use. And if we listen to the naysayers who would probably not agree with Pete Buttigieg this evening, they would be saying that we're already way under parked because everybody who lives here is going to have 2 cars, and you're going to be putting a lot of cars across the street anyway. So I think we've tried to strike a balance, and I kind of think that we've hit the right kinds of numbers. The idea of something that's underground, not visible, and the worst that it does is it provides you a green roof. I just don't see that as something where I would, if it were up to me, which I know it's not, so you don't have to yell at me, I would just say that that's not a factor in the decision. The number of units we have in this building is not unusual in this block. Most of the buildings that are 5,000 square foot lots have 6 units.
So let me ask, what is the next, is this, I've forgotten, is this a public hearing?
Yes.
Public hearing tonight.
So Professor Hunter, Chairman Hunter, should we open up? Unless the other planning board members are not done, or IAIR or the AHRB have other comments.
I mean, we haven't even gotten to the elevations, so we might want to look at those.
Why don't we finish the
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So
you want me to continue?
Yeah.
So you can see the front elevation, the one that projects out towards the street, the one that's closest to the street, is the same as it remains from the previous presentation. The adjacent, the stairs and the lobby, entrance lobby is slightly different. It's just more simplified. And then from the previous scheme that was presented to the planning board, this one has a flat roof, and then you see the background the elevator overrun or elevator to the roof that allows for access to the roof, and the stair area that's in the back that's behind the elevator tower. The one thing that I was talking to Patty about after I saw this elevation, this iteration, is that the portion that sticks out beyond, as Patty was pointing out on the south elevation at the top, that portion there could be actually set back to the same line as the brick building, so that in the front elevation, in the west elevation, that little notch above the roof of the stairs and lobby can go away. That way the brick can continue across, and then the elevator that projects above can be detailed so that it's a separate part of it'll be in the same line as the brick facade, but it'll be detailed with a separate material so that the brick can come through, so that you can see that the lobby and the stair is just a simple mass that's in between the brick and then the other building, with the elevator in the back. I hope that makes sense.
And then, David, what you were talking about this morning, then you were going to extend that roof.
Yeah,
that roof will come right up against that.
Right.
You know, one other thing, because I started kind of looking at that, and I thought that was a good idea. I also feel that this roof is down too low. Now that we've simplified this, it's almost like this wants to move up, so we could actually have clear story above the doors, and this would be up higher, and that way we could probably have another window on the stairs, on the landing between the first and second floor, so you get that light, which would be nice.
Okay. Well, this is a public hearing. I don't know if we need to open it. If we didn't open it, I would move we open the public hearing. Somebody say second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the line that would like to speak to this?
Yes, I'll.
You mean?
I mean, allow them to talk. Denise. You're free to talk now.
We also have a lot, if it's going to be helpful later, we've got all the 3D kind of stuff.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Denise Wooden. I reside at 154 Palisade Street. I've lived in the top floor apartment there for almost 13 years with my daughter. And nowhere in this presentation did I hear anything about the impact that this is going to have on our building. Let me just tell you about this site. I know you all think you know it. You've probably visited it. You know what it looks like, but you don't know what it's like to live right next door to it. Up until now, including till now, we live next door to a modest sized single family home. I understand at some points it's been used as a 2-family, but most recently in my time here, it's been used as a single family home that was owned by an elderly couple who had 1 car. They had a beautiful deep backyard. The yard is still there, with gardens and beautiful trees and grass. And we can look out in my apartment, we look out our living room window and we see all that. We see the yard, we see the trees, we see the sky, we see the backs of other buildings, the old library across the way. And it's very quiet here. At night, you don't hear a single thing, except for very early this morning, the beeping of snowplows backing up. And there's a beautiful mature tree right up in front, which looks like it's going to be destroyed under this plan. In the side yard, there's just a nice side yard with some open space, a beautiful tree there, and forsythia bushes all along the walkway that were just a pleasure every spring. That's what we've had up until now. If this plan goes through, we're going to have a solid wall looking out my living room window and my daughter's bedroom window. We're going to lose light. We're going to lose our view. We're not going to be able to see there's not going to be much of a yard in the back left to look at. And when you brought up the idea of having exposed parking in the back, I just wanted to fall off my chair, because we look out our front windows at 99 Cedar, the parking lot there, which is relatively new. We look across the street to the Mercy College parking lot. And now the thought of looking out our back windows and seeing yet another parking lot instead of the beautiful yard that's there is it's a horrible thought. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the noise issue. You're going to have a terrace that just looks like it's slightly above where our apartment is, that people will have access to. What's to prevent people from being up there on summer nights and partying and making all kinds of noise and really having an impact on this very quiet neighborhood? The other thing is that our house was built in 1889. And what is going to be the impact of underground parking garage or any construction of all on our foundation? And also, how is that going to work with tearing down the building that's the existing house that's so close to ours? And, you know, if that gets, I mean, I don't know when that's going to happen, but I don't have central air. I'm on the 3rd floor. It gets very hot up here. I rely on having all my windows open in the summer. How am I going to do that if there's all this construction and demolition going on so close to our house? And also, I'm working from home right now, so that's another issue. The other thing is that, I'm just looking. Again, you know, the issue of, you know, having a few plantings out front, you know, how can that replace the green space that's going to be destroyed and the beautiful mature tree that's out there? It can't. I would, you know, if this goes through, I would totally support having them park in the parking lot across the street. That lot exists. It's underutilized. Let people park there. And the other thing I wanted to mention is this is not the kind of housing we need in Dobbs Ferry. It is going to be, I spoke early on, quite a while ago, with, I believe it was Mr. Kim, but it was one of the new owners of this place. And I was told that it was going to be luxury apartments for young professionals who are working in the city. And that's not what we need. Every development that's gone up in the past several years has been luxury housing. Don't we have enough luxury housing? What about low and middle income people? And don't tell me there's going to be one affordable unit. A, that's not enough. And B, my understanding is that the affordable units, it's a very strict formula. So middle income people like myself would not fit into that formula. And at the same time, we can't afford most of the other apartments in this town anymore. So it's not what's needed. It's not what's good for the neighborhood. It's certainly not what's good for myself and my landlord who lives on the 1st floor and the other tenants in the building. So, you know, I don't see, I'm not anti-development per se. I would not have a problem with a 2 or 3 or maybe even a 4-unit building that preserves some of the green space, that was smaller in scale, that was more in keeping with the neighborhood and didn't have such an impact on the people living in our building. So I think that's all I have to say for now. So I guess that was probably enough. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. It's interesting to hear from people in the neighborhood. I don't think we've had that opportunity before, and we will obviously be aware of what you're saying.
Okay, there's another gentleman, Mr. Varcasia. Mr. Varcasia?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Glenn Varcasia. I own 154 Palisade Street for over 20 years now. And has some obvious questions. The parking I've been listening to, and I haven't, on the whole block, there's not one structure here that has underground parking. And if you look at how close the parking garage is to my building, we're gonna be hearing that garage door going up and down all night long. Not to mention how close it is to my window. Now, I have a ranch-style fence that divides our property line. I could stick my hand out the window and touch that fence. Now, what do you plan on putting as a divider? A sound barrier, which is a block wall, which I'm going to be looking at a block wall, which is going to be within arm reach. And if not that, then I'll be listening to people with their cars waiting for the garage door to open with their music on the phone, staring right at me from 4 feet away. Then that's just a small point. There's like I have a barn. My house was built in 1889. The barn that's in my backyard was built before my house. It used to hold the horses for the beer factory down at the river that the Bucci's great-great-grandfather used to make the deliveries. Now, your structure is going to go right up to it, even past it. So, which means in between the barn and my house, I have a patio where where my family we barbecue, and now it's going to be. I'll be looking at a wall. I mean, there has to be something where we can move. Give me some room. I have so many questions and so much to talk about. Let me just see 1 second. But just it's just that my quality of life, the sunlight, even like the small town effect. I mean, I'm paying high taxes here so I can stay in a small town. You know, I used to have plant my tomato plants right with the guy next door with Vinny, and now I'm gonna be looking at a brick wall. Now I invite any one of the board members to come to my house and look at it yourself, because looking at pictures, it really doesn't tell a story. But I invite you all to come into my house, come into my backyard, come into my living room, look out the window, and see the effect that's going to have on my quality of life. And with Dr. Ferry's master plan and the smart growth, it's going against what the whole thing's about. But right now, that's all I have to say until we go more into it. But really, look at the garage door. And that garage door is going to be right next to my living room, my dining room, going up and down. I mean, if it was next to any one of you, I'm sure you wouldn't be happy.
Well, thank you very much for your views, and it's important, especially as you're the next door neighbor, to hear what you say. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening.
Good. Melissa, anybody else?
Nobody else has their hand raised.
Did you want to look at the 3Ds?
I guess.
Okay, so this is kind of positioning the house. I think this will be helpful in showing what Denise and Glenn were talking about and their concerns. This is looking up the street. Obviously, here's where the building is. This is the entrance. You can see how this kind of the massing breaks down. It picks up the line of the other houses along the street. It does break itself down in massing, I think, the way that we were talking about doing successfully. I think, David's ideas on it. And Denise, just so you're aware, if you're still on, David Kim's not the owner. He's the architect. Michael Lang is the young man that you spoke with, and he's the owner. And I understand, I mean, he's trying to do something that is good. He's committed to it. And I think he's supported a fairly aggressive effort to find a solution. As we go up the street, here's, look at the front, you can see the separation between the house next door and this building, which is similar to the other building. This is actually on this street. That's considered a fairly wide separation between buildings. This is more units by one or two than some of the others, but it's really not a difference in use. Here's looking down the street the other way. And then if we go up, you can kind of see how the roof lines work. When we started this, we had all of the buildings slid up tight to the street. And that was in response to the conversation that I had with Denise at her house. She was nice enough to let me come in and take photos from her apartment. And if you remember, what we tried to do is not have anything project into the backyard, but through a lot of conversation and effort, I think we determined that there were other factors that really needed to dictate, particularly all the work that Rob, Steve, and Ayer did to create those, those guidelines. So here's kind of looking bird's eye looking down, so you can kind of understand how the massing on the street works, which I think is very successful. And actually, if I go back, I think there might be one thing that I want to just point out in terms of what the massing is, because it might be giving misleading. There's a retaining wall that's way back here that you see in the back, that fence on top. That's at the back of the property. That's not adjacent to Glenn and Denise's house. This here is not next to this. This is not a terrace that people can get to. That's actually, we're having, as you're aware, this is a very sloped site. We're basically excavating down to get the building down as far and close as we could. Effectively having our first floor, even with the first floor next door, which, is, I think that was one of the objectives as well.
And I think it's also important to note that the building, this building would not cast a shadow on the south side. It would not, because it's on the north side of the building, and it just would not interfere with the light getting to 154.
Other questions?
I guess I'm just wondering, in response to the comments that were made by the neighbors, the immediate neighbors, whether or not there's anything. Now I see, if you go back to the site plan, I think the issue about the garage door is below the first floor of the adjacent building. So I'm not quite sure that the noise issues are going to be very meaningful, because it's basically buried in a pocket with a wall. But if you go to the plan, go to the site plan that shows this building relative to the.
Oh, okay, I went the wrong way then.
Building, the context building. Yeah. Now it is true that by. Where's the?
Yeah, they move really slow for some reason.
All right.
It'll be an hour and a half, maybe. We're almost there. I think this one?
No, the plan view.
Oh,
that shows the plans of the adjacent houses next to it's like your context site plan.
Yeah, that somehow got jumped. There you go.
Right. So this building does, because we pushed it back, it's a little bit less than half of it is actually directly up against the adjacent building.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good thing, right? Most of the windows on that side of the house will have at least oblique views, going in that direction. Having said that, I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done by way of a small setback or anything else that could relieve the sense. If you go to that side elevation, the straight side elevation, if there's anything that could be done to relieve or animate the way that.
Are you talking along here?
Yeah, that elevation, looking
south elevation.
Yeah.
If you look at the south elevation.
I mean, it's a big box.
It is. And I guess what I'm wondering is there a way to, yeah, that view in the upper right.
Yep.
Is there something that can be done both either with the massing or the massing and the fenestration in some ways, that the fenestration is not identical on all three levels? Is there something that can be done to animate that volume the way you've animated?
Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of too often animating volumes.
No, I know you don't want to make it crazy. You don't want to make it, it's on the verge of being too busy as it is. But I do think there, that is.
I mean, there's a massing concept. Obviously, we haven't tested it out in plans, but my guess is that if we cut the building here and slid this mass to be contiguous with this, but still come back, you could take that 8 to 9 feet and put that in addition to the 10 feet that we have to the property line. So in the back, you'd get closer to 20 feet from the property line to the building itself, which would just pull it back. And I think for Denise, that would open up that diagonal view into the backyard better, because this would just be further away from that property line.
Yeah, so I guess that would be my only thought, additional thought. Be good to see if you can do something like that or some other trick to break up that box, the boxy appearance of that volume.
A quick comment, Bob. There is a disparity between the front elevation. By the way, there is something interesting that in the 3D sketch, there is a better definition of the material reading of two sides and on the seam. But my comment was trying to tie to Rob's comment on there is a disparity between the front elevation and the other elevations or the rear elevation. There is like I'm going to say something that you might not like it, Patty, but there is like a marriage between Hunter's Run typology and the Oceania building in the back. So I think I'm just trying to tell you that if you see the scale of the front elevation on the street, there is a scale that is relatable. On the back, it's kind of off scale because you don't know if it's like a 15 feet stories, or there is something very out of proportion to the front and the back read. There is not a consistent read on the, and I'm just talking about the east elevation and the front elevation. The top, you say east, right? Yes. That elevation and the back. There is no, I will never dream that they're at the same building. And I think that one of the issues that is happening here is that say that there is a very interesting element that is the scaffolding. I will call it scaffolding because you call it balconies, but it's a scaffolding structure that adds certain type of character. That is, it's an applied element at this point because it's not integrated to the building. So there is, if you want to break the south elevation, for example, I think that there should be a consistent. The building has to make up its mind in which direction it should go, and also, let's say the ground floor windows. Why not have some sort of backyard or extension? You can access the backyard. If you have a deck, why not use it in the back, or like an extension, a garden? So that will start creating some kind of a relatable scale that makes the entire reading of the facades more human scaled. But those are comments trying to see how you can treat the south elevation or the north elevation. And also the disparity of the roof is still, I think the massing is going. It's definitely we consider it. I consider it as a good massing, the break of the two volumes, the seam, etc., etc. I will try to do the seam a little more.
Yeah, I think we can play with this and see what that does to that. And at that point, does the roof on this change? We can look at those ideas. The one thing I do want to point out is that this is the grade. This dashed line, we're basically 1 foot below grade with the back of the building.
Okay.
So it's
why can't you access the back? You have a back here.
Oh no! I mean, we if you look at our floor plans, I mean, this is how we're using the. We haven't laid those out yet. For us to go to the trouble of designing all the units, I mean, obviously we've done sketches, but maybe there's a door that comes out onto this. But
you understand, Patty, what I'm saying is that if you try to make the two elevations consistent, the 4 elevations consistent, try to achieve some consistency using the elements of the balconies, etc., trying to integrate it into one coherent read of the building. I think that will help a lot. But those were my comments.
I don't want to interrupt such a nice conversation, but we've got 7 more items.
Mr. Varcasia had a question. I'm just going to allow him to ask it if he's still there.
If she's there still.
Yes. Yes, the question also I had was construction. Are we going to see a schedule, and how long is this going to take? And if we're going to have an opportunity to speak again.
You have one. But
I have one what?
An opportunity.
Yes, I just asked if I'm going to have an opportunity to speak again after it's finalized and everything. And no?
I'm sure we'll be back at the same place next month. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Okay. Can we move on to the next item here?
Sorry, I have one more comment.
Okay.
Okay. Denise? You done?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify, does that mean that the public hearing is going to continue next month?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because I think that some of our other neighbors, because we were only notified on Monday of the agenda, I think that Glenn and I did not have a chance to notify the rest of our neighbors, so we'd like to do so.
Good. Thank you, Denise.
Okay.
And also Denise should know that the meeting will start again at 7 next month, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
On this application?
No.
No, no.
Okay, just want to make sure.
On item number 1. So the chairman needs to make a motion, somebody needs to make a motion to adjourn the public hearing to March 4th.
Okay, I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? I hope not. Oh. Next on the next item is item 4, 189 Broadway, continuation of pre-submission conference for proposed minor subdivision and new townhouses. I see Javier is on.
Good evening, everybody. I know you're going to have a long evening, but I'll go through this. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
If you can, there I am. All right. I'll just move this over. So we are coming back to you. We had a site visit in November that most of you were at, and then we presented at the December meeting. So the November, just to kind of recap, my understanding was basically the assumption was the direction was to split the development. We wanted basically to have a large gap if possible. Our original proposal from October had been, 4 townhouses in a row, making an L shape, even though we were, and that was deemed basically too massive. So we were directed to split it, and we've tried as much as possible to respect that. We came back in December with a division, and the direction there was that was an improvement. That's what I understood. But we wanted the Broadway side to be smaller, and the basically the rear side or the west side, which is tucked into a kind of a finger of the property, that could be a little larger. We could look possibly for some concessions there. So we've come back to you with we submitted, and we did come to you in January. We were hoping to have an audience with Ed Manley, but and a few scheduling issues. So let me go through the presentation as we have it. I wanted to say that, from our November site visit, we had flagged these 2 trees on the general heights relative to Sussex Hall, which of course is the roughly 7-story building next to us. And that is, those still remain in this thing. So the general height is not increased. I think you saw from that site visit that the first floor of apartments really is substantially higher than the property at 189 Broadway. So let me share my screen here. All right, so this is a colorized version of the plan that you had before. We've done since some modeling, but the first is that the vehicle basically for splitting into 2 buildings is essentially dividing in 2 lots. You, I think, not permitted to have 2 lots on 1 parcel. So in this case, as I mentioned, I think at the site visit, basically we end up with a flag lot. That this property here is, in the rear lot. This property is on this building, I should say, is on the front lot, and 189 remains as 3-family here. So these red lines are kind of clarifying where the divisions are, at least in this scenario. They're somewhat arbitrary. So I'm going to ask you to look at the overall design first, and we can massage these things, the setbacks and so forth. There are some. The setbacks, mostly we're trying to respect them from Sussex Hall. This is about 9 feet as their, I guess, side yard. So we're trying to stay back there, but in some cases, this line could move over right next to this building to have the required width there and so forth. But then so it's just a matter of where we kind of push the impervious surface and so forth. So this is basically the drive that comes through. Let me zoom up a little bit here. Right, so you're coming off of Broadway, kind of near the utility pole. These are 2 guest parking spots. We're trying very hard to make this lower level of this to be, or street level, to be an accessible apartment with a ramp that would come up to a front entry here. And so these are guest parking. They could be the resident parking, but we're accommodating 4 spaces below the building. So the drive at this point comes down, and basically entry into the parking here, and then stairs and so forth. So these are basically 2 flats in here. These are 2-family residence with a roof element. So the width here is basically maintaining what the fire department needs to access this back building. What we're trying to do here is basically the grade is coming, the ramp is coming down. The property makes something of a hump right here. So this would be a little bit of a retaining wall along this, away from that retaining wall, but on this side. So right here, we're trying to create a generally level area. You'll see in the 3D model that because we basically lost from the townhouse original scheme, everybody had a terrace. This was very important that they had this access to really come out to the yard individually. They would have their own terraces and so forth. That was a very strong request of the owner to have that, and we've lost that. Right. So what we're trying to do here is basically, and these people in particular, as the drive comes around, they're really kind of landlocked and have no opportunity for direct outdoor space. So this is sort of a communal space. It also provides a turnaround spot for the cars to kind of reverse back up that way in case they're not coming down here to park. So you'll see that in the 3D model that we're trying to model this as a feature, and this would sort of tucked under here would be, kind of a shared barbecue and sort of communal space, as has been the tradition here with the patio and entertainment out on the lawn. So this drive, we had the opportunity from before, the parking to go in this front side that raises up the building, because of course you can't really put residential under the parking. And we would have had to dig out here a retaining wall to get that down far enough. So we elected basically to bring the parking all the way down, the drive all the way down to the backside. As you recall, that the contours drop off pretty steeply going this way. So at this point, it's basically at grade, about 180. And we're accommodating 6 cars down here at the lower level. So you'll see that in a minute. And this is a 3-family building. So it's essentially, one unit is stacked up here. And these other the other 2 units are, one has this full rectangle here, and then they split in half on the next one. And then the other unit has a top. So these trees, we're trying very hard to keep. This one here, and especially as a tulip. We're going to speak with the site engineer, but avoiding the roots and so forth. But these represent where we think there's opportunity to retain or replace trees, including this kind of central one here. So this is a kind of overlay of the building in front of Sussex Hall. So it's a little deceiving there, but you can see from the trees. So this is the parking level, right? The cars have come down here. They park at this lower level. One unit is here. The next unit is here with this element above. And then on the other side, right? So coming down here, these, by the way, represent the sky exposure plane. So part of our original hesitancy to put much over this side is the ground slopes down. So we'll have the challenge meeting that. So here's the other side. So this is basically the west side now. So you can see where the grade is way down here at 180, as I mentioned. So the cars have come around, they're parking below. So, and then these are the units, as I mentioned. So these are kind of stacked here, and this is really the first floor of apartments at Sussex Hall and the second floor. And we have views from the 3D model for them.
And your setbacks are appropriate, right?
So the setbacks we are maintaining. So we're somewhat maintaining them. So let me jump back to that. Right. So this is a in terms of rear yard. So the flag lot, the way it reads is this is the front yard, which of course we have an enormous front yard, which is from Broadway is how it's measured. And typically the rear yard is on the backside, right? So in this case, the building is maintaining that. We would like some balconies to extend out into that space. Then again, we could count this as the rear yard if we, then, obviously we're not maintaining it, but these are our own kind of divisions. So really the only place that we're not maintaining this is right here. We're proposing 6 feet. This is the fence. And of course, this, sloped area down here. There's no building or neighbor to this side, which we understood that was something the board would entertain, is basically tucking this, further up that way. So this is, the beginning of the modeling of the building, so forgive the, the architectural design. It's not quite fully baked, but you get an idea of the size here. So this upper roof level is pretty much hidden from here. And you're seeing this, relative to the Sussex Hall. This is the, of course, viewing platform, the view coming down, and we're maintaining that, view out to the river. This is the, right further up Broadway. This is the side of Sussex Hall. And by separating the buildings, you're getting that, sort of peek through there out to the view. This is, where we're developing. So this is where the ramp would come down, or the drive would come down, and the cars would turn in that way. So how open or closed that is, I'm not sure there, but this is the separation between the buildings. So this is the view from the lawn, right, looking back at it. So we've changed materials a little bit, and it's more open, of course, to this fantastic view on the southwest. This is sort of an upper view, so you get an idea of you know, the relation between these things. The idea is that these materials, that you don't see them all the same. You know, too much brick is too institutional, too much of one. So, you know, we're still working on what that would be. But here, what you can see is this area here that we're basically at essentially grade. And so not a lot of manipulation of the site. And then this sort of tucks under, you know, this balcony, and this is the communal space. So this is where these residents would have opportunity to, you know, it's something of an organic plaza, if you will. We've also, you know, contoured the land so it kind of goes down. So this is kind of walkable to go up a little bit of grade instead of having a retaining wall and a drop there. This view is taken kind of at, we'll say at level, right? So you can see what is, you know, what's being interrupted. And as you move in here, you know, so this is the gap. This is what the gap has afforded us, is straight view from these windows here. This is kind of zooming up a little bit so you can see, you know, these, so this again is the gap. So these windows, you know, have an oblique view maintained. Sorry. So these are from the ground floor, sorry, the first floor of apartments at Sussex Hall. So this is that one prominent corner window, which is, you know, this guy here. So from in there is a view that we think you would see. This is, you know, just rotating a little bit. So you're seeing part of the backside of 189. This is in the same, you know, we don't know the configuration of apartments, but generally you're seeing this, right? So some of it you would see at 35 feet away or whatever, this the building, but then there's a gap there between the two structures. This is now on the upper level. Again, you're seeing, no, I'm sorry, there's the same first floor apartment. This is now the next floor up, looking down. So you can see you're pretty well clear of the buildings. So I have the model as well if there's any, you know, anything else we want to see here. But mostly those are the views that we wanted to present tonight.
Well, I think this is a good step in the right direction. I think from our site visit, really understanding the space that was available kind of behind the apartment house here really, I think, opened our eyes to what the possibilities were in using that space so that there was not so much new building put on the other green space here.
Hey, Javier, can I see the viewing platform again from Broadway?
Sure.
Great. Thank you. I think this is an improvement.
Right, thank you.
I do too. I think this could work. I have to say that the architecture, the way, and realize we're not about architecture, but it never stops us from going on. But I feel like there is something, the architecture is not, I know that that's not what you've been focusing on. You've been trying to figure out the massing and siding of the pieces and how to make it, how to make the whole thing work a little bit more like a campus. Having said that, right, and again, I know it's not cooked yet, but there's something actually almost vaguely institutional looking about the two buildings and some of the views. So that, yeah, you know, I know that you'll work on that. But I think it's a site planning strategy. For me, I feel like it works.
I think having that site visit and understanding what was available around the back side of the
Somebody has a feedback problem.
I think it's Steve.
Oh. Steve, you're getting some kind of feedback.
Don't know.
It just started with me. I feel like every time I come on, Steve has audio issues.
Maybe you want to, Steve, maybe you want to hit mute if you're not going to speak.
Then I have to find it again to get it off.
It's the little red microphone, or you can go up in the upper right-hand corner of your.
I can mute you also. I'll just mute you, and when you're ready to speak, just indicate.
Okay, yeah, that was it.
There is a gentleman who's raised his hand. I don't know if you're hearing it from the public or not.
This is not a public hearing yet.
Not a public hearing yet.
Okay.
Any thoughts from the other members of the board?
Javier, I think this is much improved, and think that this is probably the direction that should be followed.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're not doing a public hearing, so if the board is prepared, I think we can move on.
Javier, do you have enough to keep going with it?
Yes, I do. So I think we'll be in touch with Ed Manley and with George on some of these site issues and so forth, but this is extremely helpful. So I appreciate it.
So Javier, can we get a more complete set for zoning review this time, so we can see if we can move forward with this design?
Sure, I'll send you this presentation and
coverages.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? So we received some letters from people, and one of them was, I guess the owner of our building, 191 Broadway. He has a bunch of questions here in his letter. Is that something that gets addressed by whom?
Well, all the correspondences get sent to the applicant as well. So if there are issues that they have to respond to, you know, they'll take those into account, and the board should review them as well.
Okay.
I think we've gotten a series of letters from residents during this whole process. So the theme has been that they're losing their view, which is their right. So it's the issue of.
I can't hear you, Steve. I'm sorry.
You're saying that, yeah, most of the, well, there are a couple of letters I saw anyway from residents that they are, you know, we're blocking their views. You know, I think we've, by splitting the building, that is a major improvement. And, you know, so even though it's not, we'll say, per se, a requirement to maintain their views, that, you know, it just provides more openness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're back. I think the other comment from the attorney was, you know, to move the drive to the other side. I think we visited that at the site and so forth. So if we put the drive here, right here, you know, where we're showing this view, we'd push the building back, you know, closer to Sussex Hall, which, you know, only is required to be 10 feet away. So by that gap of, you know, maintaining the drive over here, we think it does a number of things. You know, basically maintains this distance between the buildings. You know, obviously there's not going to block even winter sun from getting to certainly the first floor, which you can see here, the height. Let me move this over. All right, so, you know, the sun angle here, and nobody's losing light. They are, you know, they have the view blocked. You know, there's no question. You know, they're used to looking at right over 189. And so now there's a building, but, you know, there's not a, you know, in my mind, a, you know, terribly uncomfortable distance, you know, in Dobbs Ferry for distance between buildings. So I think, you know, we have seen that. I think the other points that the attorney had were, you know, basically lot lines and setbacks and so forth. And that's what we need to, you know, speak with Ed Manley and George about. You know, we're, as I mentioned, in the original, you know, thing where you put these lot lines and, you know, a setback from, we'll call it an internal property line, we think is a little more acceptable than from, you know, an existing real building.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the impervious surface, you know, we have to confer with our engineers about what, you know, Ed Manley mentioned earlier that, you know, you can overcome it by engineering, but it's really a different matter. So part of why we moved the property line is so that the entire burden isn't on the lower building, that he has the entire drive, even though it's being shared by the other, so it's this kind of juggling of and adjusting of areas and lines and so forth.
Mhm. Thank you.
Javier, would it make the lower building a little bit, give it a little bit more room if you got an easement over that crazy pointy property line?
Well, what we're doing already is we're sort of averaging that out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we're not staying whatever number of feet away from the point that's coming at us. So
Gotcha.
we're sort of averaging them out already. I think that's pretty common practice.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you again next month, I assume.
Great.
Good.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too.
Next item on the agenda, 253 Palisade Avenue, public hearing for site plan review for proposed new retaining walls. This is one, the property is contiguous with part of our property, and I've been excusing myself, and Steve Rosnahan has taken over on this.
It's a public hearing. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Reopening the public hearing.
I didn't open the public hearing.
Okay.
Public hearing.
Yep.
Continuation of a public hearing?
We didn't close it last time, or did we?
It did not close it.
Continued the public hearing. You adjourned the public hearing to this week.
So continuation.
Yep.
Yes.
You just need to open it now.
And I
Reopen it.
motion to open the public hearing. For your second. All in favor?
Bye.
Anybody here to talk about this?
I promoted Mr. Roth, and I just promoted Hudson Engineering, who I think, is that correct or no? Oh, sorry, Mr. Roth. Try unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Obeda from Hudson Engineering. I missed that last part. Sorry, it was connecting.
I just wanted to make sure I promoted the correct people, Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
here.
Obeda from Hudson
I'm
Engineering.
I'm the owner.
So last we left off, there were a few comments from Mr. Palmer's office. We've addressed all of them. There was one additional comment. It's a minor one, adding a note about maintaining what's already there, the stairs and whatnot, and preserving all that when we're installing the stormwater. But I don't think there were any other major issues with the actual plan that we're proposing, unless the board has additional comments.
I don't have any. Anybody else?
No.
No, I think I'm prepared to vote for this.
There's a public comment. I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Hefter? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Mark Hefter. My wife Rebecca and I are the owners of the adjacent property to the north, 255 Palisade Avenue. I just wanted to reiterate for a moment something I mentioned at your last meeting, that there being a drainage problem on the subject property. Whenever there's a substantial rain, water comes down the street along the curb. There's a depression on the subject property's driveway. The water comes down through the driveway onto their front walk into the side yard on the north side of the property, and the water has a tendency to drain onto our property. It caused quite a bit of erosion this summer. And again, although my wife and I are not architects or engineers, and we're not exactly sure from looking at the documents and the drawings what's exactly what is proposed here, we just want to make sure that this committee is aware of and hopefully will address the issue and make sure that nothing in this proposal exacerbates this problem.
So Mr. Hefter, George Palmer, the village consulting engineer, has looked at Hudson Engineering's site plan for this project and water retention plan. So maybe George could speak to that for you.
Actually, I spoke to Hudson Engineering today and we had a discussion about it. And they're going to actually add one other note to the plan that indicates that if the driveway is the driveway lip, which is where they enter the driveway and go into the garage, if that lip is less than the maximum, they were going to adjust it accordingly. So if it's a ½ inch or an inch, they can adjust it to 1.5 inches so that it lessens that water that's coming onto your property. So this proposal should not exacerbate that issue. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else to speak on this?
Not at this time.
So I make a motion that we close the public hearing. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. So we have a resolution here. Village of Dobbs Ferry Planning Board resolution granting site plan approval for the construction of retaining walls and related drainage improvements at 253 Palisade Avenue. Whereas Zachary Roth and Cassie Feldman, owners, have applied for site plan approval to construct retaining walls in the rear yard of a single-family house and make related drainage improvements on the property in 253 Palisades Avenue, and noted on the tax map sections 3.160 and locates it on the tax map. Whereas the following plans and documents were submitted as part of the application: the stormwater management plan, details, letter to Abdulaziz Yusuf, stormwater management plan, site plan application, coastal assessment form, and short environment assessment form dated 11/04/20. Whereas the planning board is familiar with the site and surrounding area and the proposed improvement plans at their meeting of January 7th, February 4th, 2021. Held a duly noticed public hearing and all comments were considered. And whereas the proposed construction of retaining walls and other drainage work is herein proposed constitutes a type 2 action under SECRA and is therefore exempt from further environmental review. Now therefore be it resolved that the planning board of the Village of Dobbs Ferry herein grants the site plan approval for the subject application conditioned on the following. 1, all applicable provisions of the village, county, and state regulations shall be met. 2, prior to the issuance of a building permit, all required site plan and village consultants review fees shall be paid, and all items in the village consulting engineer's memorandum dated February 3rd, 2021 shall be addressed to his satisfaction. And 3, the following language shall be added to the plan. Quote, approved subject to all the requirements and conditions of a February 4th, 2021 resolution of the planning board of the Village of Dobbs Ferry, New York. Any change, erasure, modification, or revision of this plan absent reapproval from the planning board shall void this approval. Be it further resolved that this resolution have an effective date of February 4th, 2021. Motion, I make the motion that we accept the resolution.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Steve, you want to go on to the next one?
Thank you, and thank you for being so efficient. See what happens when you get somebody else cheering.
Hold on, don't kick me out yet. Thank you for approving that. What happens now? Who do I follow up with to get the permit?
So we're going to need your new site plan as conditioned by, Mr. Palmer and your engineer, and then submit that and to the building department in the Dropbox or something, and we will take a look at everything and email you any other requirements. Do you have a contractor yet?
Yeah.
So give us his information, his license and insurance as well.
How do I give that to you?
Well, he'll give that to you, or he could submit it to us.
Okay, I'll follow up and figure it out.
Okay, you can email me at emanley@dosray.com with any questions, and I'll be more precise via email.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, item number 6 on our agenda tonight, 21 Riverside Place. Public hearing for site plan review for proposed deck expansion, additional off-street parking, and change of use from single family to 2-family.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if I have permission to share my screen or if you have it on your,
You can share your screen.
okay. So just quick recap. We've addressed all of the comments from Palmer Engineering. We, I believe, can address any other comments, from the board or the public. You've already seen our previously submitted letters of support from the neighbors. We are going to, finish up with the zoning board and architectural review board, and look forward to a positive referral from you, and hope we can answer any questions.
Does anybody have any other questions on this? I think George Palmer has given us some information on this, and if nobody has anything, we have a resolution available tonight, and we can move forward on this.
Mr. Chairman, did we open the public hearing? I don't recall. It was only 2 minutes ago. I can't.
Well, I move we open it, the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I learned something about the height of retaining walls and regular walls.
Always valuable.
Yeah, that's always good. We have anybody who wants to talk about this from the public?
Nobody's raising their hand.
Okay.
I think Steve went to get the resolution.
Can we close the public hearing?
If you would move it, we would.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Good.
Here's the second.
All in favor?
Aye. Good. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Me.
Whoever. All right. I do have a resolution. Village Dobbs Ferry Planning Board resolution granting site plan approval for the construction of a deck, retaining wall, and related site improvements at 21 Riverside Place. Whereas Amy Jo Neal, owner, has applied for site plan approval to construct a deck in the rear yard and a retaining wall for an expanded driveway in the front yard of a single-family house, and make related site and drainage improvements on the property at 21 Riverside Place and denoted on the tax assessment maps, and it goes through a description. Whereas the following plans and documents were submitted as part of the application, which lists all the things we and our consultants have looked at. Whereas the planning board is familiar with the site, the surrounding area, and the proposed improvement plans, and at their meeting of February 4, 2021, held a duly noticed public hearing and all comments were considered. And whereas the proposed construction of a deck, retaining wall, and related site improvements as herein proposed constitutes a type 2 action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act and is therefore exempt from further environmental review. Now therefore be it resolved that the planning board of the Village Dobbs Ferry hereby grants site plan approval for the subject application conditioned on the following: all applicable provisions of the county village, county, and state regulations shall be met. 2, prior to the issuance of a building permit, all required site plan and village consultant review fees shall be paid. 3, the following language shall be added to the plan. Approved, subject to all requirements and conditions of a February 4, 2021 resolution of the Planning Board of the Village of Dobbs Ferry, New York. Any change, erasure, modification, or revision of this plan, absent reapproval from the planning board, shall void this approval. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall have an effective date of February 4, 2021. I make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can we also, at this point, apply to the Architectural Review Board?
Well, you can, but not through us.
You may.
Sorry, I might have changed him to an attendee before you finish that discussion. Should I promote him again?
Where are we?
Simone is muted.
Sorry, Mr. Sakan, I didn't mean to do that.
It's okay.
Sorry. Did you have any?
I had a quick question for Ed. Can we, at this point, apply to the Architectural Review Board?
You certainly can.
Okay, great.
Submit your plans and ARB application checklist, and we'll get you on that agenda.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Next item on our agenda, item number 7, 398 Ashford Avenue, public hearing for site plan review for proposed change of use, adding a parking space and paving existing area. Those that were here last month will recall that this turns out to be the very interesting building that is down by the Sawmill River Parkway would be the nicest way to say it.
I move that we open the public hearing.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
I'll be surprised if anyone wishes to speak, but we'll see.
There's nobody from the public raising their hand.
There did seem to be a long list of items of concern in George's memo.
That was a month ago. We've made lots of progress. George and I joined the book club together. We go golfing. It's been wonderful. Can I share my screen, or George, would you want to just share an update with the board as to where we are?
Sure. We went through our list of 40 some odd items, David and I, for about an hour and a half after the meeting. And
after you got COVID, after you recovered from COVID, that's when we got to the 44 items.
Yes, and we went through them. They were addressable, but some of the changes on the plan and some of the well, we talked about separating issues. So they wanted David wanted to talk about the residential. It's a mixed use now, correct, David?
Correct.
And he wanted to change it to, well, he wants to know from the board if to keep it mixed use or to make it all residential, because that seems to be the tipping point for interior work and the progress of the project. The exterior with regard to the parking area, it's not, they're tandem spaces, there's 8 of them, they're not ideal, but it can work. And it is there now. It's not increasing the driveway width. So if you go out there today, you'll see an existing asphalt driveway apron, could be 20 feet long. You'll see snow in there, you'll see cars in there, and they can get in and out, but it's not ideal, but it can work. So that's where we left off. So I think the technical aspects of the parking can be addressed along with some of the infringements or encroachments, I'm sorry, onto the right of way, whoever owns that can be formalized with a little bit better of a site plan. But I think what David really needs to know is if this is going to be, like I said earlier, mixed use or all residential. Is that correct, David? Do I summarize that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not really a question of if, it's just a question of the process of the approval. We definitely want to make it all residential. We've already made that clear. It is the best use of the space, considering that as I think Steve pointed out, it's basically in the south. The building is basically sits on the southbound lane of the sawmill. So it is best to be residential. And what George is saying is, if we separate the two issues, as in aim to have an approval of the change of use plus the additional 2 parking spaces in front, and I can share my screen if that makes it a little easier for everyone to refresh just their memory as to what we're looking at here. So what we have here is the existing building. The idea is there's nothing changing about the actual building. It's adding the 2 spaces in front, and the conversion of a change of use from those 3 commercial units to 3 residential units. Everything else essentially stays the same in terms of the building size and things like that. So it's establishing what that, if there's enough spaces, which there is 8 spaces on the side lot over here, plus the 2 spaces in front, that's 10 spaces, and there's 8 apartments. And that's essentially what we're looking at. Now with regards to the being able to pave that side lot, that's a question. There's still some issues that I need to work out on the drainage plan that have come up today, and George and I have agreed to push that a little bit, perhaps until the next meeting. I need to redo some of the things on the drainage plan, but that's not what I want to discuss tonight. What I want to discuss tonight is, can we move forward with the change of use so I can move forward as residential units, and what would that pile up be? And things like that. That's basically the question.
It was interesting because we just earlier tonight, we had a discussion about residential versus commercial and mixed use.
I know. I was on there for that, and
yeah.
I just want to show. Ed may have seen this, but this is what I was talking to George a little bit about this earlier. This is what the building used to look like, and I did appreciate the comments that some of the board members said around kind of keeping that look. I'm not really changing the look. As you see, it's going to look the same. This is how on the bottom is what it looks like today. I've kind of toyed with the idea of making it a little interesting, possibility of bringing some flair to the neighborhood with some murals. I don't know how that would fly, but I think it would look interesting. But the general idea is to keep the building looking the same. It's just not a retail neighborhood. That's pretty clear. I think up on Ashford, I see the argument and Christie's comments around keeping that some sort of a walkable neighborhood. I definitely appreciate both sides of that argument. For right here, it's a matter of being able to get the proper approvals to move forward with converting those to residential units.
Is that legal to take down that outside fire escape?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I would like you to consider as a land use officer, not a consulting engineer, is that he's going to need a couple of variances for parking because he has 5 that would qualify for on his property, and that can be paved, and George can look at the drainage for that. The rest, frankly, can stay grass, and he could park on it. We don't really care, but the ownership of that is not his, and we haven't found a deed for it. So He's also cutting in 2 spaces on the public right-of-way, moving his sidewalk back. What I have a question about here is here we show no little island between the rear of the 2 parking spaces and the driveway. And on one plan that I'm looking at shows it protruding out, which would make it harder for these people to park and then to get out and possibly cause an accident. So
Yeah, no, that's been removed.
good. Okay. So I will list the variances, and this has to go back to the Board of Trustees with a recommendation letter from you and drainage review from Han.
Can we separate the two? So the drainage, so the drainage is something that can be reviewed and addressed prior to paving, which would happen in the spring?
No, it's all on the plan, on the approved plan. So the whole plan gets approved by the Board of Trustees and then by the building department for permit. So this is your plan review. So Han is going to look at the drainage into the dry wells for the pavement, and just that black area is what you're going to be paving.
And what if I decided that I did not want to pave? Just for the sake of argument, because I'm trying to not.
By code, we don't allow gravel driveways in commercial property. So once you're more than 3 families, you can't have gravel, but you could do open weave paver or something like that. And that would reduce your amount of stormwater. So that's the engineering that needs to be done here. Your engineer and George Palmer need to work that out. And then this board will write a letter of referral, if they so deem fit, back to the Board of Trustees for their approval, because this is in the DT zone.
I have one. First of all, I love the fact that you're cleaning these buildings up, and I love the idea of some big artwork. I mean, this is such a funky place. You can do almost anything, you know? I feel like it's kind of a interesting, funky spot. And so almost anything goes, in my opinion. But if it wasn't residential on the ground floor, what do you imagine the ground floor would be if you're going to sort of try to keep the basic look of the larger windows? Because it feels very public, right? Anybody sitting in that room gets headlights passing through their living room every 10 seconds. So
that's what good darkening blinds are for. The room darkening, you know.
But are you going to try to keep? But you would try to keep the same kind of
correct
larger scale windows on the ground floor, even if it's residential.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other reason for that is because Robert, they're long and skinny apartments, and that's the biggest source of light.
Yeah.
So having those windows actually helps a lot.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great that somebody's taking these these funky buildings and kind of making them into something. There was Niall Kane, who's another architect in town. He cleaned up a little bit one of the buildings that's further down on Ashford. He did a little work on that, and it's kind of a funky little area. And I love the idea of doing some big artwork on it or something. I don't know.
You know, that mural artist, Richard Haas in Yonkers, he's sort of world famous. The big murals in Yonkers with the classical perspectives and so on, the Trompe l'oeil.
Yeah.
Richard Haas lives in Yonkers. Anyway, I'm just curious, how long have you owned this building?
Just over a year.
Okay. mean, just, and this has to do with what we were talking about at Ashford earlier. I mean, in your experience, you really can't get any commercial renting those ground floors.
It would honestly, you know, I'm trying to do everyone a favor here with the driving. It would be a nightmare getting on and off the parkway.
Right. Yeah.
And pulling in and out of the.
Yeah, you don't want that turnover. You're right. Yeah, no, I understand that.
It's already a challenge. So it makes the most sense from a traffic perspective. I know that was part of some earlier conversations. From a traffic and perspective, it makes sense to have the least amount of cars, and that would be a residential use, especially for small units.
Okay, thank you.
I think motorcycles is the key.
He had a moped parking on his last. Just get the drainage on the site plan worked out and submit, the full set of revised plans. And I think this board, can work with you next meeting.
Just a question.
So to answer David's question, does the board think that residential is the way to go? Does anybody else think it should be anything else?
No, I'll support residential.
I
I
believe
think
residential is the best use for that.
I don't think.
I think if he could put up a tattoo parlor there, I would get a tattoo.
Code doesn't allow that
There was
anymore.
one there.
And yeah, I know.
As they put in the last tattoo parlor, somebody added to the code that tattoo parlors are no longer allowed in Dawson. And then unfortunately that one burnt down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It was
So
across.
now I have some patches of skin that are bare. It's
Oh, geez.
really terrible.
Well, then, I think we answered David's question then.
Yeah, no. For me personally, it wasn't even a question. But I'm glad that everyone on the board agrees. So okay, and I will move forward with the drainage updates to the site plan and things like that I've been working with George on, and I will try to turn that around as quick as possible.
Also, if I may, Ed, the referral to the Board of Trustees will also require their approval of the 2 parking spaces on the street, or is that not an issue?
Right. So the code allows them to count, off-site parking towards the required parking spaces.
I guess
that's one way you could do it with a pileup, or you could do it with, allowing, the adjacent on-street parking. Several ways for them to do that, and I'll write that up for them.
Okay. Okay, great.
Good. Alyssa, is there anybody, this is a public hearing, strangely enough. No interest, amazing.
You know why there's no interest? Because people are actually happy that there are improvements being made. Usually if it's an objection, if there's something, honestly, the fellow across the street, he's thrilled that it went from looking the way it did. And I'm not bragging in any way. It's just, it is an improvement. I want people to.
It's a big improvement, David. So
There's one commenter. Hold on.
There is the impact on traffic.
Patty, can
Yeah.
you hear us? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Since no one else was commenting, I wanted to say, David, thank you. I'm really, I'm impressed with what you're putting together. I'm not sure about that mural, but Steve, if you can get Richard to come up, we could perhaps have a view of the Hudson River from the sawmill painted on the side of the building, which would be a lot of fun.
Well, then people won't come actually all the way into town and go down to the actual Hudson.
And I'll be blamed for somebody's restaurant doing 2% less because of it. So thank you very much.
That could be the people in Ardsley's view of the river.
Yeah. They could paint the rest of Ardsley on the side of his building.
There you go. There you go. That reminds me of the. It's like, what's the best part of living in New Jersey? Is that they get to look at New York. All right, I appreciate the time of this board, and I know somehow I always get the graveyard shift, but thank you again for your patience.
We've got 3 more to go, so.
Oh well, good luck.
You've moved up.
As the only one drinking coffee.
So that's T. So motion to adjourn the public hearing to
To close the public.
fourth.
Not to close it, to adjourn it, right?
I'm sorry?
To adjourn it, yeah.
We're just adjourning it?
Okay.
Okay, motion, then make a motion to adjourn the public hearing to the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We will move on. Thank you. Our next one is item number 7, 398 Ashford Avenue, public hearing for site plan review for proposed change of use, adding a parking space, paving area. We just did that. Item number 8, 110 Buena Vista Drive, pre-submission conference for proposed rear addition.
So I have Christina Griffin as the contact for this, but I don't see her among the attendees.
Oh, sleep.
Well, find somebody else.
You can't replace Christina.
No, I know.
Should we move to the next?
We'll move to the next one and see if you can, right? Item number 9.
Your hand for 110.
Huh?
Nobody's raising their hand for 110.
All right, move on.
39 Brace Terrace, pre-submission conference for site plan review for proposed retaining wall. How about that?
I promoted Paul Petretti. There are 2 Paul Petrettis. I'm going to promote both.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
One's enough. Right?
You deal with 1, not 2.
Wow.
Hey, Mr. Petretti.
Uh-oh, an evil twin.
Paul's taking no chances.
That's right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Hey.
Yeah, I signed on with 2 computers. I had trouble signing on, so I signed on with 2 computers. Okay.
So this is the small letter P, Petretti.
Yes. So,
Okay.
what would you like to hear?
39 Brace Terrace.
Okay, so this is a project, okay, to put in a retaining wall along the rear and part of the rear and part of the side yard. Okay, it's going to be a segmental wall, and it's going to start left to right, as you see the drawing. Okay, it's about 4 foot high. It goes to about 9 foot high. I did jog the wall to get around to the base of trees, come back along the westerly line, okay, northerly line, excuse me. And then what they like to do is level the backyard, a little patio where the steps are in the back, nice set of stairs coming in to get to the entrance, the basement, lower level entrance. And they want to add some fencing. The Cape Cod fence, which is shown on the drawings on the right side as you're looking from Brace Terrace. And then they want to enclose a small area to the left of the house and put a patio in there so the children can play in that area. And that's basically the application. The wall will have a 4 foot metal fence on top of it. And that's the proposal.
Does anybody have any drawings on this?
Yeah,
I'm looking at them.
Oh, somehow I didn't get them.
listen, it's just, it's one sheet of paper. You might have just missed it. Anyway,
Sounds straightforward enough.
yeah.
George, are there any concerns?
This is preliminary. We didn't look at it that closely yet, but you're right. It's just a wall. It's not very complicated. On other wall projects, something to keep in mind was we talked about when this gets open to the public hearing, the neighbor, they usually raise the biggest concern, and we get into putting ivies and whatnot and screening. So I think that would probably be the only issue that would come up here.
Steve, there are digital plans that you can connect to from the agenda if you want to take a look.
Okay.
I don't see any details on the fence.
No.
Yeah, I put a picture on the fence. Okay, I felt that picture speaks a lot clearer than a detail. But it'd be a 4-foot fence, metal, typical separation 4 inches, and then that's on the lower right, and then on the lower to the left of that is the Cape Cod fence, which is going to go around the right side and around the area they would like to enclose on the left side of the house. Also in the rear, before you get to the retaining wall, left to right, okay, that would be Cape Cod fence too. Actually, wood fence.
I'm looking at a plan that was received January 14th. Is there a different, does anybody else see something different online?
Ed, I submitted other plans, okay? When I first made the application, they did not want to enclose the area to the left of the house, and they did not want the Cape Cod fence. So between making the original submission, which was 24 by 36 sheets,
yeah,
11 by 17s that have the color images on it. And
okay, because I'll have to find that for the next meeting.
Yeah, Ed, I've got revision 3 updated 1/20/21.
Okay.
That's what I have too.
So do you want to send him to AHRB at the same time or before he comes back next month to get an opinion from them?
We could.
They could look at the fence and possible screening, if they think so.
Mhm.
Anybody?
We can call for, I don't know. We can call for a public hearing next meeting.
Yeah, you definitely could call for a public hearing. And but I'm just asking, would you like to have him go to the AHRB and have them send you an opinion?
Sure.
Public hearing.
Sure, especially if they can get it in before our meeting.
Yeah, I think they can.
Yeah.
Because they're every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, Paul, you want to apply for the AHRB concurrently?
Yes.
It'll move things along faster.
Say yes, Paul.
I did. Yes. Why not?
Yes.
Another night out.
Right. That's enough for us tonight. Is there anything else, Ed, that we need to do?
So
Well, we need to call for a public, I call for a public hearing at the next meeting.
Excellent idea. Then we can get rid of it.
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nighty night.
Hey,
Thank
So
you.
anyone from 110 Buena Vista show up? No.
they're sleeping.
Surprising.
We should do the same. We'll continue them
Good
as a
plan.
pre-submission.
All right. Item number 10, the last item.
Sorry, Donna.
Go, what? You have somebody? No.
No, nobody has shown up. I hit the
Okay.
wrong person. We're good, I think.
And MDR 2 zone continuation of discussion on possible zoning code changes. I don't.
So I think I sent everybody materials early this week. I heard from some of you, not from others. I guess there's several things. One is the formal adoption of the Palisade Street character guidelines is one thing. Then in the process of doing that, Ed Manley and I have been trying to fill in various other blanks that were in the dimensional tables that have to do with the heights and some of the MF zones and some other places, and we've done that. And then, as you know, there's this idea of the mapping change for this one property at the end of Rochambeau where it meets Broadway that we think should be zone B like the rest of B Broadway. So the only thing I would say is that I'd like to call for a public hearing at the next meeting for us, for the planning board, and I'll send out all the materials again, as will Ed, for the planning board to formally adopt these and, or I guess have a public hearing, but we can have a resolution ready. I don't think there's anything controversial here. But if we could call for a public hearing and have sort of resolutions at the ready, then we could pass this on to the AHRB and then jointly to the Board of Trustees. I don't know, Ed, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, that was very succinct. Ditto.
I want to add that Ed's been an excellent job.
Ed's been super helpful, and I want to tell him I appreciate all the work he did to kind of help.
I want to add that both of you guys did an amazing job. It just isn't one. I don't know if I responded to you, Rob, but it's really a wonderful document. Thank you.
Sure. And also getting some of these other blanks filled in. Ed was really helpful surveying some of the other, the heights and some of the other MF zones. So I think these are all sort of, they're small, but they're all little improvements. So.
Yeah, the height issue is the only thing I feel like I'm not up on. So if you guys could disseminate that as well, that would be great.
Sure.
Dan, does that sound okay to you? Move along on this? Good, thank you. I'll take that as a yes.
There is some member of the public who wants to speak.
Oh, good.
Good.
Is it Patty?
Patty?
I'm reminding Ed that one of the things that also needed to be dealt with was that right now there's a zoning line going down the middle of Maple, so that one side of the street is MDR1, the other side of the street is OF something. Both sides of the street are supposed to be the MDR1. The line is supposed to be in the middle of the south lane behind it. So if you're going to clean up that stuff, you ought to get that one too.
Okay, maybe Ed, maybe you and I can look at it, and that'd be great.
I looked at that years ago. It definitely, I agree with
Does that make sense? Then let's put that in the
That for a long time.
Let's add that to the
street is not meant to be OF4 or whatever it is.
good.
5.
So let's add that to the list of cleanup things that we're trying to do.
Just a question on that property you mentioned that on Rochambeau, I guess.
Right.
You're going to be changing the zoning on that property? Is that?
Yeah. Right now, there's a I've forgotten what is it MDR? What is the zone that the rest of
MDR1 and a lot of the houses on Broadway there on the end of those side streets are in the B zone.
Right.
And
B
that
Broadway.
one is not. It's in the MDR1, and it would fit better in the B zone. It's existing multifamily and a large property, and it makes sense.
Yeah. We probably ought to make sure that the owner gets noticed at least.
Oh.
I think Patty represents the owner, and the owner.
Do we know who the owner is actually?
It's Luigi. What's his last name? Enzo's father.
Well, we're calling for a public hearing, so
yeah.
we should make sure he's here and if, in the best of all worlds, to testify in favor of it or say that, because I think actually it does bring his building more into conformance, right, Ed?
Yes, it does.
It's a better match.
He will welcome it.
Yes. Luigi is totally on board with this. He calls me once a month and asks if this has been taken care of yet.
Right. Okay. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
So we need to call for a public hearing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Rob, you want to do the honors?
I move that we have a public hearing at the next planning board meeting for the purpose of making miscellaneous corrections to the zoning code and the map.
And adopting the MDR2.
And adopting the
Guidelines.
Palisade Street character guidelines. Do I have a motion?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
You.
all right, I move we adjourn. How about that?
Second.
Woo.
Third,
Good
fourth,
night,
fifth.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Stay
Thank you.
well.
Good meeting, guys.
Yes. I like the earlier ones.
Good night.